Chapter 2141, Cultivating. To kill others and wrest away their power of demon gods, this would forever be the fastest method. The demon god's tomb had only opened several days ago, so the yin-yang twin ghosts had accumulated a limited amount of the power of demon gods. Even so, after killing them, Lin Ming's first totem mark directly reached perfection. Not just that, but the second totem mark also started to slowly appear. Lin Ming could feel that even though this second totem mark appeared slightly different from the first one, if he wanted to completely manifest it, then it would require much more power of demon gods. The demon god's tomb would remain open for a long time. Lin Ming absolutely had the option of slowly gathering the power of demon gods and didn't need to be hurried. However, he was worried that if he stayed in the demon god's tomb for too long, then he might find that the good fortune Saint Sovereign had already left seclusion. At that time, humanity would once more fall into dire peril. As for contending with the good fortune Saint Sovereign, it would all depend on Divine Dream's leadership. But no matter what happened, it was sure to be a difficult and blood-filled battle. All of these thoughts flashed through Lin Ming's mind. He shook his head, placing these worries in the back of his mind. These were inevitable matters to begin with, and all Lin Ming could do now was do everything he could to increase his own strength. There were far too many enemies he had to face. The good fortune Saint Sovereign, the unfathomably deep soul emperor, and even the entire dark abyss. Each one of these enemies was stronger than the last. They pressed down on Lin Ming's shoulders, but with his current strength he wasn't able to shake any one of them. Still, Lin Ming didn't give in. This pressure on him was also his great lucky chance. And if he wanted to reach the peak of martial arts, he needed such a lucky chance. Since ancient times, peerless powerhouses often required more than just heaven-defying talent and destiny, they also needed the momentum of the world to be pushing them towards greater accomplishments. 10 billion years ago, the Azura Road Master and Immortal Sovereign had been in such a situation when they faced the invasion of the Abyssal Demons. 100 billion years ago, the Demon God also experienced such a situation, facing the great shattering of the demon universe. This is what others meant when they said situations made the hero. The current Lin Ming also stood atop this wave that swept over the world. He was pushed to his current position, and if he could stand proudly where he was, then he would become a legend that would be passed down for over 100 billion years. The earth was boundless and barren. In the world of the demon god's tomb, besides demonic spirits, there was no other life. The only lives that stood out were the other abyssal trial challengers. But they were enemies that could kill you at any moment. This was a world of deathly stillness, but also a world where dangers pervaded every corner. To stay in such a world for dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of years and withstand endless loneliness, infinite slaughter, and desolate cultivation, even someone with powerful nerves and tenacious willpower would find it hard to bear. Pang! Amongst the midst of scattered demon bones, a brilliant light suddenly burst out like fireworks in the night sky, dissipating between the heavens and earth. With it, a miserable cry echoed out. An abyssal demon tumbled onto the ground in distress, his body covered with blood. Lin Ming grasped a bone spear and quietly followed him from behind, like a devil emerging from the depths of hell. "Stretch out your arm." Lin Ming's voice was cold and brooked no resistance. The abyssal he struck down from the air came from the Flood Alliance and only had an Empyrean-level cultivation. Facing Lin Ming's pressure, this abyssal nearly suffocated. It was impossible for the abyssal to resist Lin Ming's aura. He obediently stretched out his arm, and then Lin Ming reached out sharp claws to wrap around this arm. With a bit of strength in his fingers, 5 sharp nails pierced into the abyssal's body. Laws of famine, swallowing. Lin Ming revolved the swallowing laws, savagely sucking out the pure power of demon gods within this abyssal's body. A moment later, the abyssal lay splayed out on the ground like a dead dog, his entire body soaked in a cold sweat. In that instant just now he had felt as if his entire bloodline had been sucked out by Lin Ming. However, he didn't die, and Lin Ming didn't seem to have any intention of killing him. Lin Ming waved his hand and said, "You can screw off." Hearing these words, the Abyssal was dazed, in disbelief that he could survive this. "Are you not leaving?" A cold light flashed in Lin Ming's eyes, and the Abyssal quickly scurried away. Lin Ming took a deep breath, drawing in every wisp of the power of demon gods into his body so that he didn't waste even the tiniest bit. He opened his eyes, slowly turning towards a position somewhere in the void, and faintly said, "Since you've come, you might as well come out." From the silent void, loud laughter suddenly echoed out. "Ha ha ha! Ninth Elder's senses are truly sharp." With this voice, a hand suddenly appeared and ripped open the barrier of a concealing array formation. An Abyssal walked out. This was Deep Child. After being in the demon god's tomb for a long time, this was the first time Lin Ming encountered Deep Child. Lin Ming didn't know how much power of demon god's demon child had absorbed. Facing Deep Child, Lin Ming was deeply wary of him. He could feel that this Deep Child was like a cold and ruthless wild beast, hiding his fangs until the moment came to reveal them. "Interesting, you actually let that Flood Alliance Abyssal go," Deep Child said, a thoughtful light in his eyes as he stared at the fleeing Abyssal from the Flood Alliance. "But, you shouldn't be some kind of blindly benevolent fool." As Deep Child spoke, he looked towards Lin Ming. Lin Ming didn't reply, instead glaring back at Deep Child and coldly asking, "Just what are you looking for me for?" He was already prepared for a fight. Although those in the Deep Alliance had made an oath, such an oath likely wouldn't have any binding force on Deep Child. Deep Child chuckled. "This is just a chance encounter. Since you don't wish to talk to me much, then, let us meet once again in the deepest depths of the demon god's tomb." As Deep Child said this, he turned and left. From start to finish he never attacked Lin Ming and didn't even reveal a bit of killing intent. Lin Ming frowned and watched as Deep Child slowly disappeared from sight. He didn't know what tricks Deep Child was playing at. Deep Child clearly possessed formidable strength, and yet he restrained himself this entire time. Deep Child didn't try to take his ceremonial rites book, nor did he seek out the Great Flood Crown Prince for some sort of final showdown. In these past months, the Deep Alliance and Flood Alliance had come into conflict numerous times, but there had yet to be a great battle with deep losses yet. Lin Ming shook his head, no longer thinking about it. His time in the demon god's tomb was extremely precious. He needed to grasp every moment he could to raise his strength. As for whatever traps or secrets were in the demon god's tomb, or whatever plots Deep Child was planning against him, only when he had sufficient strength could he deal with these things. Lin Ming's figure flickered and he flew away. He searched for his next target, whether it was a demonic spirit or more abyssal prey. This was already Lin Ming's 10th month in the demon god's tomb. The demon god's tomb was extremely broad. In these 10 months, Lin Ming traveled, spending the majority of his time in quiet cultivation. Slaughter and cultivation, this was the entirety of the demon god's tomb. Lin Ming didn't want to involve himself in the great war between the Flood Alliance and Deep Alliance. But, as long as he met someone from the Flood Alliance, he would attack them without hesitation. They were his prey. This venture into the demon god's tomb was meant to be a grand slaughterfest to begin with. Since Lin Ming joined in, he naturally would make use of these rules. As for things like mercy or morality, to talk about such things now was foolishness. During these 10 months, Lin Ming's name also spread out. There was no longer an abyssal stupid enough to consider Lin Ming as a mere upper Empyrean abyssal. Because no one knew Lin Ming's true name and only knew of him as the Ninth Elder, slowly, the Abyssals of the Flood Alliance gave Lin Ming a new name, the Ninth War Demon. These days, in particular the Empyrean-level Abyssals of the Flood Alliance, they all shivered upon hearing the name of the Ninth War Demon. But no matter how infamous Lin Ming's exploits, he didn't kill every Flood Alliance Abyssal that he saw. He discovered that, by using famine-swallowing laws, he could easily draw out the power of demon gods from the bodies of other abyssals. Thus, as long as some abyssals were willing to offer him their power of demon gods, he would mostly let them live. This was no some act of mercy, but because Lin Ming had his own plan. He did this because he wanted to raise his cultivation speed up as fast as possible. Lin Ming had his own ambitions. He wanted to accumulate his totem tattoos to the limit in the shortest time possible. According to the Jade Slip, the more power of demon gods that a trial challenger possessed, the greater their chances of withstanding the inheritance of totem abyssals and passing the abyssal ritual. Moreover, once he succeeded in receiving this inheritance, then this power of demon gods would also be perfectly absorbed by the trial challenger during the process, sublimating into a part of their strength. Chapter 2142, Cultivation Shortcut. Within the demon god's tomb, the slaughter continued, grinding on. Perhaps it was abyssals slaughtering demonic spirits to absorb their power of demon gods, or perhaps it was abyssals slaughtering abyssals to steal their achievements. And like this, 3 years passed. In a black swamp within the demon god's tomb, Lin Ming was slowly absorbing a wisp of pure power of demon gods. He glanced at the totem marks on his arm. Currently he had already condensed his 6th totem. In these past 3 years, Lin Ming's cultivation speed was equivalent to the results of training for dozens of years outside. He had fully stabilized his upper Empyrean boundary, and his cultivation was rapidly progressing at 10,000 miles a day as he approached the limits of an Empyrean. Seeing the 6th totem mark about to be completed, Lin Ming hesitated for a moment. He radiated his sense outwards. Then, his lips slowly curved up. In an area not too far away, he saw that it was time to harvest some of the previous arrangements he made. He slowly rose upwards, turning into a beam of light that shot towards the direction his sense told him to go in. He was extremely fast, like a coursing lightning bolt. In a quarter hour of time, he had already flown to his destination. Here there was a canyon. And deep in the canyon was a concealing array formation. This was an Empyrean-level array formation, but to Lin Ming it simply existed in name only. Lin Ming raised his right fist and demon power shivered as it stirred in his body. Gotcha! A fist punched out, smashing into this concealing array formation. What? What happened? After the concealing array formation exploded, several abyssals rose up, bewildered. They had established a momentary resting spot here some time ago. Even for an Empyrean, if they were to participate in endless days of cultivation and slaughter, they would still feel mentally worn out and need to rest. They would normally gather here, and there were abyssals that were specifically charged with being on lookout and guardian array formations. But today, all of these precautions had failed. It was only when someone came knocking at their door and the array formation exploded apart did they respond. If someone could quietly approach and then easily smash apart their hidden array formation, such an opponent was likely at the true divinity level. A true divinity level opponent wasn't someone they could deal with. However, as they rushed out and saw this intruder, their complexions suddenly turned incredibly ugly. The 9th War Demon. Why it's you again. Those that gathered in his canyon were Empyrean-level abyssals of the Flood Alliance. In the demon god's tomb, they were considered weaklings, and it was always easier for weaklings to survive if they joined forces. In these past days, they had relied on their teamwork to accumulate a great deal of the power of demon gods. They had always been careful in their actions lest they become prey for true divinity abyssals of the Deep Alliance. However, what was incomparably sad was that in these past 3 years, they had already bumped into this dark star known as Lin Ming twice. The first time was 2.5 years ago. Not too long after they entered the demon god's tomb, they fought with the Empyrean-level abyssals of the Deep Alliance until they finally encountered Lin Ming. Because of the massive disparity in strength, they were beaten to the ground. But, what was strange was that Lin Ming actually didn't kill them and instead let them go. They originally rejoiced in such merciful actions, and at the same time, they also laughed at Lin Ming for being stupid. But after 1.5 years passed, they actually encountered Lin Ming in this dangerous mystic realm once more. Lin Ming still didn't kill them. He didn't even take the cultivation methods or heavenly materials that they found so far, but only took away all the power of demon gods they had gathered. This made them so depressed they nearly vomited blood. But, at least they passed through this danger with their lives intact and also had some minor harvests. As long as there was life, there was hope, and they started from the beginning all over again. Now this was the third time they encountered Lin Ming. For a time, the faces of these abyssals turned blue. You should all not want to die, right? Hand over your power of demon gods. Obediently follow my orders and I will not kill you, otherwise, none of you will escape here alive. You should all know that I possess the ability to make sure none of you will be able to escape. Lin Ming's words were overbearingly tyrannical. The lungs of these Flood Alliance abyssals nearly burst open with rage. They had gathered their power of demon gods after so much time and effort, and yet Lin Ming wanted to savagely steal it all away. Did you use some secret technique to follow us? An abyssal suddenly sucked in a deep breath. To be found once by Lin Ming was normal, to be found twice could be called a coincidence, but to be found a third time, how could this be possible? Even if they had bad luck, it shouldn't be this bad. Upon hearing this abyssal's question, a cold light flashed in Lin Ming's eyes. Lin Ming traced his spatial ring and the surrounding temperature suddenly and precipitously dropped. These abyssals felt as if they had all been caught by the scruffs of their neck and none of them dared to speak. They were already sure that Lin Ming had some unknown methods to follow them. Moreover, when Lin Ming initially didn't kill them but let them go, this wasn't some random act of benevolent mercy, but because he wanted to fatten them up before harvesting them. Thinking of this, the complexions of these abyssals turned darkly ugly. Those that were able to enter the demon god's tomb were all proud children of heaven, and yet they were being raised as if they were farm animals. This demon, he is too evil. How could a tracking mark have been placed on us? Before this we gathered with His Highness the Crown Prince, but His Highness didn't tell us we were being tracked. The Crown Prince that these Flood Alliance abyssals spoke of was naturally the Great Flood Crown Prince. The Great Flood Crown Prince was formidable, but the tracking mark that Lin Ming left on these abyssals was formed from his battle spirit. To an abyssal, a battle spirit was a strange and relatively unknown thing. Perhaps a battle spirit might not be able to play any role in a battle between true divinity-level martial artists, but to use it to track someone was quite easy. A battle spirit mark would nearly never wear away. Moreover, because abyssals were unfamiliar with battle spirits, they were extremely hard to detect. With a battle spirit mark, Lin Ming knew the locations of these abyssals from start to finish. At a fixed interval of time, he would harvest them. Otherwise, if too long of a time passed, these abyssals might die somewhere and his arrangements would all be made useless. Hand over your power of demon gods or die, Lin Ming icily and decisively said. At the same time, his grand mist force field spread out and covered this canyon. With just a hint of killing intent, these 8 Empyrean-level abyssals would never leave this place alive. Let's attack together. I don't believe that with so many of us working together we cannot deal with a single one. An enraged abyssal said, not believing in this situation. Lin Ming's methods had touched his bottom line. Abyssals were born with violence and bloodthirst in their bones. In their lives they had only bullied others. Just when had they been bullied like this? Just as this abyssal finished shouting, before his voice fell, a blinding spear light flashed through the void and caused a giant explosion to light up the world. This abyssal cried out miserably and was sent soaring backwards. He smashed into the mountain rocks, his large body causing a sizable area of the divine Ironhard mountain walls to collapse. Bang! The rocks burst apart. This abyssal was drenched in blood, and a bloody hole the size of a baby's arm was pierced through his chest. He hadn't died, but in the demon god's tomb such a heavy wound would mean that even if he didn't die now, his future days would be a struggle indeed. The complexions of the other abyssals changed. To hear rumors was one thing, but seeing was believing. An upper Empyrean abyssal had been easily and instantly felled by Lin Ming, and now they were filled with dread towards Lin Ming's strength. Because of what they saw, all these abyssals meekly handed over their power of demon gods. Lin Ming used the swallowing laws to absorb all of this power. In a short incense stick of time, the 6th totem mark completely formed. Everything was connected. To the current Lin Ming, whether it was the power of divinity, the power of demons, or anything else, he could transform it into a part of his strength. He could already feel that he was making great strides towards the limits of an Empyrean. After absorbing the power of demon gods from all these abyssals, Lin Ming's thoughts stirred. The strength of the magic cube spread out from his inner world, forming a giant vortex that covered the surrounding area. These abyssals were panic-stricken. They thought that Lin Ming had lied to them and was about to kill them, but in the next moment, they lost their minds in the spiritual black hole created by the magic cube. The abyssals all slumped over, one at a time. Looking at these abyssals that fainted, Lin Ming unhurriedly used the magic cube to take away all memories of their power of demon gods being taken away today. He used the magic cube's illusionary abilities to create entirely new memories for these abyssals to explain why their power of demon gods had vanished. Like this, although they would fall into extreme despair, they would still diligently continue to collect the power of demon gods to support Lin Ming's cultivation efforts in the future. Otherwise, anyone that knew they were being tracked by others and even raised like farm animals would develop thoughts of resistance. At this time, only an idiot would continue to gather the power of demon gods just to give it away to others. Even a normal person wouldn't do this. They would rather not cultivate than vainly benefit someone else. But if they forgot all of this, then none of it would be a problem. This also meant that Lin Ming could use this move multiple times. It could be said that with the battle spirit tracking mark and magic cube, Lin Ming had found a cultivation shortcut in the demon god's tomb. Chapter 2143 World Phenomenon. After pillaging this squad of abyssals from the Flood Alliance, Lin Ming continued in this set pattern. For half a year, he continued to strike out repeatedly, recklessly stealing the power of demon gods from abyssals as he carried out this large-scale farming. And after every harvest, Lin Ming wiped away the memories of these abyssals. There was never a moment that he would fear he would be discovered by others. Not to mention that the abyssals of the Flood Alliance wouldn't necessarily realize what happened to them. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to do anything to him. In this demon god's tomb, Lin Ming's strength already stood at the highest tier. Besides the great Flood Crown Prince and the mysterious Deep Child, Lin Ming was confident that there wouldn't be anyone else who was his match. Like this, the power of demon gods in his body rose rapidly in a short period of time. This strength was incredibly pure, able to perfectly fuse with Lin Ming's meridians and body without creating a single problem from different types of energies mixing together. Time passed. Into the 5th year of the demon god's tomb, Lin Ming had already formed 12 totem marks on his hand. Lin Ming didn't know what the limit of totem marks was, but he knew that according to the jade slip of the demon god's tomb, some ordinary abyssal elites would have a limit of totem marks in the dozen or so, and some would have even fewer. Lin Ming had used a mere 5 years to reach this point. If this were to be known by other abyssals, they would be completely dumbfounded. Lin Ming looked at his arm. The 13th totem mark was clearly in its rudimentary state. He was planning to completely manifest this totem mark in the next 10 months. Then, in this demon god's tomb, he would break through to the limits of an Empyrean and perhaps even touch upon the threshold of true divinity. But at this time in the distant horizon, the earth began to shake and rumble. Great plumes of black fog rose up, gathering in the skies. This black fog contained a horrifying aura. It transformed in the skies, twisting and struggling, like a demon that was growling at the world. Looking at this black fog, Lin Ming felt his mind shake. In the next moment, he felt a terrifying pressure from this far-off black fog, as if he were gasping for breath. This caused Lin Ming to be even more wary. He already possessed a true divinity level of strength, yet this energy was able to leave him suppressed to the point of gasping. This was too dreadful. But at this time, the earth began to crack apart, rupturing open. The demon god's tomb was an extremely stable world, and the strength required to tear apart the earth like this was simply unimaginable. There were abyssals who weren't too far away that were also attracted by these strange and wondrous images. For such a world phenomenon to occur, that likely meant that something extraordinary was being born. Lin Ming's thoughts moved. He used his sense to probe for a moment, and then he flew towards the area where the phenomena appeared at an unhurried pace. And at this time, there was a loud explosive sound like the eruption of a volcano. Waves of magma swelled forth from the cracked earth, soaring into the heavens. A team of abyssals was caught in this torrential wave and were sucked in like a tiny boat in raging seas, immediately disappearing. This sudden change caused the abyssals rushing here to pause for a moment. For a time, no abyssals dared to move forwards. There were perils and risks littered throughout the demon god's tomb, and many places where even true divinities had a high chance of dying. Without a doubt, there were lucky chances in these places, but to an Empyrean abyssal, maintaining their life was the most important point of all. Without their life, they had nothing. After Lin Ming saw this team of Empyrean abyssals being swallowed up, he also moved with even more caution. His pace also slowed by a great deal. At the same time, he radiated his sense outwards to investigate the situation around the phenomenon. Soon he found someone familiar. In the midst of howling winds, within waves of energy surging in the skies, a beautiful figure stood against the gales, her long dress flapping around her. This woman was Shang Mei. At this time, Shang Mei held a bone sword in her hands, her long hair fluttering in the wind. And not too far away from Shang Mei, there was also a true divinity abyssal from Deep King Road in full battle mode, ready to fight. Lin Ming had some impressions towards this true divinity level abyssal. This abyssal had also appeared in the inter-alliance competition, but it was only that he hadn't fought. Lin Ming wasn't sure what his true strength was, but if Deep King Road was willing to send him out here, then his strength likely wasn't too bad. And what Shang Mei and this Deep King Road abyssal elder faced were 3 true divinity level abyssals from the Flood Alliance. The one leading these 3 abyssals was the Great Flood Crown Prince. Ha ha ha! Your Highness Holy Demonis, if seems if fate wishes it, we will meet after all. The demon god's tomb is so broad and I have been here for so long, and yet this is the first time I have run into your Highness. I surely must thank this world phenomenon for this. The Great Flood Crown Prince smiled, his fake words a veneer of civility. And at this time, the 2 true divinity level abyssal behind him moved forwards, encircling Shang Mei and the Deep King Road Elder. The Great Flood Crown Prince's strength was clearly above Shang Mei's. And with the 2 true divinities from the Flood Alliance added on, it was clear which side was weaker. Shang Mei furrowed her eyebrows. She looked at the tumbling black fog behind the Great Flood Crown Prince as well as the phantasmal forms that faintly condensed in the fog, and she formed speculations in her heart. The energy that was dissipating from this mystic realm faintly resonated with the power of demon gods that she had absorbed, as if it were the source of the power of demon gods. In addition, the energy contained a terrifying pressure that even caused true divinities to quiver. Shang Mei suspected that this mystic realm was likely related to the demon god from 100 billion years ago. Just what sort of existence was the demon god? He could be called the founder of the entire Dark Abyss, and if it were a lucky chance that he left behind, just what sort of lucky chance would that be like? It was unknown just what trigger had activated this mystic realm, but for it to suddenly appear from nowhere, it was clearly a great stroke of good fortune for the high-level abyssals that entered the demon god's tomb. Such good fortune, who wouldn't want to have sole possession of it? The Great Flood Crown Prince had clearly also approximately guessed this. Thus, he gathered up 2 other true divinities from the Flood Alliance to prepare to fight Shang Mei. He wished to severely beat up Shang Mei, or at least force her to draw back. Shang Mei's eyes flashed with a cold light as she rapidly analyzed the current situation. The demon god's tomb was far too broad and the space laws here were too stable. Even a true divinity-level abyssal couldn't step through the void and could only fly, without any tricks. Now, for this mystic realm to suddenly appear here, although the aura of the energy was incredibly vast, it was simply too far away. Many true divinity-level abyssals had yet to discover it, but they would soon enough. Presently, Shang Mei was clearly unable to contend against these 3 true divinity-level abyssals from the Flood Alliance. But if she could delay for time and wait for more true divinity-level abyssals to catch up, then perhaps a favorable turn might appear. Wah! Layers of the power of demon gods erupted from Shang Mei's body, completely covering her. Beside her, the Deep King Road Elder also moved. His joints and body released explosive crackling sounds as layers of scales appeared on his body. He had utilized a body metamorphosis unique to the abyssal cultivation system. Seeing this, the Great Flood Crown Prince diabolically grinned. You want to delay for time and wait for reinforcements? Do you think you can last that long? Clang! The Great Flood Crown Prince flipped his hand and drew out a saber engraved with the image of a ghost head. He pointed the saber straight at Shang Mei. Force this battle to a quick conclusion. The Great Flood Crown Prince ordered the two other abyssal elders. However, just as he finished speaking, he suddenly paused, frowning. He turned and saw that several miles away, an abyssal wearing black battle armor and holding a thick bone spear was flying towards them like a ghost. This abyssal was Lin Ming. This boy. The Great Flood Crown Prince scowled. In these past years it was clear to everyone just how strong Lin Ming was. Now, the Great Flood Crown Prince fully believed Deep Child's words that Lin Ming's talent surpassed his own. He synthesized all sorts of information together to estimate that Lin Ming had the strength of a peak lower true divinity. He wouldn't have worried about this level of strength to begin with, but now, if Lin Ming were added together with Shang Mei and the Deep King Road Elder, this battle would be 3 against 3. Although he still maintained the advantage as before, wanting to end the fight in a short period of time would be far too difficult. And if this battle dragged on, then more and more true divinity level abyssals would arrive. At that time, the battle to enter the mystic realm would become even more ruthless and bloody, and getting the opportunity to swallow this lucky chance by himself would be less likely. In particular, the Great Flood Crown Prince felt a deep sense of dread towards Deep Child. If he were to catch up, then the consequences would be dire. You are courting death. The Great Flood Crown Prince glared at Lin Ming like a beast eyeing its prey. He completely unleashed his killing intent. Lin Ming flew forwards without changing direction. He seemed slow, but he flew several miles in a mere moment. Silently, he appeared next to Shang Mei like a spirit, facing the Great Flood Crown Prince and the two other true divinity elders of the Flood Alliance beside her. Chapter 2144, Underground World. It's you. Shang Mei never thought that Lin Ming would appear at this time. As she looked at him, a complex light appeared in her eyes. In a sense, this black abyssal standing beside her was her fiancé. Although Shang Mei couldn't accept him, she still had to acknowledge that she held some sort of peculiar and special feeling towards this fierce-looking abyssal. Strong winds howled. At this time, Lin Ming stood a bit ahead of Shang Mei. From Shang Mei's angle, she could see the towering back of Lin Ming as well as the gloomy and uncertain face of the Great Flood Crown Prince. Currently, the Great Flood Crown Prince was estimating whether or not he could severely wound Shang Mei and Lin Ming in an incense stick of time if he attacked now. But at this time, the ruptured earth below began to shiver and whine once more. The edges of the cracked earth started to close in, as if the opening were about to seal itself away. That massive tide of demonic energy spouted out from the depths of that abyss, like the terrifying aura of a demon god being born into this world once more. But now it drew back, closing in, like a great maw that had opened and was now biting back down. From everyone's positions, they could see an infinite abyss exposed beneath that massive crack. It was clear that this terrifying and world-shaking aura was being transmitted from this underground abyss. The entrance to this underground abyss was this massive crack, but now, the entrance was soon to be sealed up. The several abyssal masters present were stunned. If they didn't enter now and waited until the crack closed back up, then it would be impossible for them to find another chance. To forcefully open up the ground in such a powerful mystic realm required abilities that no one here possessed. Go down! The Great Flood Crown Prince ordered after seeing the mystic realm about to close up in a dozen or so breaths of time. At this moment, he and the others couldn't bother with Lin Ming anymore. We're going also. Shang Mei cried out. Without hesitation, her body plunged downwards like an arrow. Lin Ming followed behind her. With the true divinity elder from Deep King Road, 3 figures plummeted like meteors, instantly crossing the 100,000-foot distance. During this rapid flight, the Great Flood Crown Prince looked at Lin Ming and the others. After a moment of thought, he decided not to attack. The crack was far too large, it would be impossible for him to stop them from entering. Even if he managed to force Xiang Mei and the others back, they would eventually enter from another direction. If they entangled themselves in some melee, then if things didn't go well, even he wouldn't be able to enter. On the contrary, if they entered this underground space together, then he could rely on his absolute strength to control the absolute initiative. Whoosh! After Lin Ming and Xiang Mei flew down, other abyssal Empyreans, unafraid of death, followed them. Even though they were aware of how perilous this mystic realm was, with such a lucky chance before them, there would always be a chance for them to leap to the heavens in a single bound. In the face of such opportunity, there would always be desperados willing to recklessly risk their own lives. The figures of numerous abyssals sank into that endless abyss. From left and right, the endless rock walls slowly squeezed in. It was unknown how deep these rock walls extended. If they didn't manage to enter the mystic realm before these rock walls closed up and were pushed between them, then that would truly be a pitiful fate. With how hard the earth was in the demon god's tomb, even a true divinity-level abyssal would have to spend a considerable amount of time and effort if they wanted to somehow force their way out. As for an Empyrean-level abyssal, they weren't too strong to begin with. If they were buried underground, then they might not be able to crawl out for dozens or hundreds of years. It was even possible they would perish underground. The true divinity abyssals and those with similar strengths like Lin Ming and Xiang Mei were calm. But the Empyrean-level abyssals all had foreheads dropping with cold sweat. They continued to accelerate downwards, in fear that they would be caught in the pressure of the rock walls. Whoosh! 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 Abyssal after abyssal flew free from the underground crack. Then, infinite darkness flashed before them. In the next moment, their field of vision suddenly widened and they saw that they arrived in a broad underground world. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Above their heads the earth began to close up, the entrance had been blocked. During their hasty flight just then, after a brief estimation, everyone realized that this place was at least 1,000 miles underground. To suddenly be sealed in a mystic realm over 1,000 miles below ground, many Empyrean abyssals felt their hearts racing. Such a mystic realm, it shouldn't be inescapable, right? If it were, then that would truly be tragic. Lin Ming looked at this underground world. He could not see where the end was, and it wasn't pitch black either. Rather, there were shimmering sparks of light that overflowed from the rocks below, somewhat dimly. But a true divinity could still use their sense to perceive their surroundings in a completely pitch black world. Moreover, there was light here already, so it wasn't any different from daytime to them. Underground, rocky stalagmites littered the floor. And between many of these giant stone peaks there was a lake that was extremely eye-catching. This lake was dark gray in color. It was around 100 miles in diameter and covered a vast area. The surface of this lake wasn't calm. Fist-sized bubbles rose up and broke into the air, as if this were a pool of heavy and burning hot water. As Lin Ming saw this lake, his heart skipped a beat. He could faintly feel an inexhaustible essence of the power of demon gods condensed in this lake, as if all that vast energy that gushed out from before came from it. Recalling the magma-like liquid gushing out from the ruptured earth, Lin Ming suspected that this was the water from this gray lake. Because the lake water had been stimulated for some unknown reason, it had pierced through the 1,000-some miles of rock and formed a tide of demonic energy. This was similar to the volcanic eruptions of the mortal world. But just how much strength would be required to break through 1,000 miles of the demon god's tomb rocky earth? This mystic realm should be related to the demon god from 100 billion years ago. Xiang Mei's voice suddenly echoed in Lin Ming's ears. Lin Ming was startled. He looked at Xiang Mei. Xiang Mei continued to speak in a sound transmission. I'm not too sure of the specifics. Let us head down first. All right. Xiang Mei, Lin Ming, and the true divinity from Deep King Road all flew towards the lake. And behind them, several Empyrean-level abyssals from the Deep Alliance followed at a distance. It was at this time that the advantage of being in an alliance appeared. If they were to come here alone, then these Empyrean-level abyssals would surely be swallowed up in the battle without any bits remaining. But now, they found a slim chance of survival. The more they neared the lake, the more Lin Ming felt that every drop of this lake water contained essence of the power of demon gods as vast and irresistible as the sea. Strange lines spread across the surface of the lake, beating in rhythm with the most profound abyssal laws and forming an absolute force field that locked in this part of the world. 1,000 feet away, everyone could feel this formidable pressure. Everyone's flying speed suddenly slowed down. Lin Ming swept his gaze outwards. He could see a massive amount of broken bone fragments scattered all around the lake. These bones had been here for countless years and were already bleached white. However, what was strange was that in between these scattered bone fragments there were also several intact corpses. These corpses hadn't turned into fragmented bones, but still had withered flesh. This left Lin Ming surprised. He didn't know how long these corpses had been here. If these were trial challengers from the most recent times, then this could be understandable. But, if these bones came from ancient times, then that would truly be shocking. It was hard to imagine just how they managed to withstand the corrosive strength that pervaded this world. Lin Ming didn't think much on this, because at this time, he could see a group of abyssals running in his direction. The one at the head of these abyssals was the Great Flood Crown Prince. And besides the Great Flood Crown Prince were the 2 true divinity-level abyssals of the Flood Alliance, as well as about 10 Empyrean abyssals. This was around the total strength of the Flood Alliance in this underground world. All around Lin Ming, the complexions of the abyssals turned ugly. The Flood Alliance had the Great Flood Crown Prince holding the scene, but they only had Shang Mei, Lin Ming, as well as an elder from Deep King Road called Deep Echo. In terms of masters, they were clearly at a lower level. The Great Flood Crown Prince swept his eyes out. As he didn't see the Deep Child who stirred fear in him, he suddenly grinned. Without Deep Child here, he could confidently say that he could completely wipe out all the Deep Alliance abyssals present. Really, the road to heaven is wide open and yet you refuse, but you would rather burst through the gates of hell. Originally, if you stayed up above then you would have been fine, but you insisted on coming down here to die. Then, how could I disappoint you? Let me fulfill your wish. The Great Flood Crown Prince looked at Lin Ming and Shang Mei, a mocking light in his eyes. Chapter 2145, The Lake of Death. Facing the Great Flood Crown Prince, all the abyssals of the Deep Alliance were tense. The Great Flood Crown Prince was already at the pinnacle of a middle true divinity. Moreover, he was a considerable deal greater than those older true divinity abyssals. Facing such an opponent, just Lin Ming, Shang Mei, and Deep Echo weren't enough to be his match. If this were back in the above world, then they could scatter out in all directions to escape. But here in this underground world, they were no different than turtles in a jar, without any place to hide. Killing intent slowly spread out from the 2 abyssal alliances. The air seemed to coagulate into something solid, making it so that the weaker abyssals found it difficult to move. Shang Mei took a deep breath and grasped her bone sword. Her mind reached a state of unprecedented concentration. As she held the bone sword in her hands, her palms were slightly wet. Even she found it difficult to remain calm when facing an enemy like the Great Flood Crown Prince. She was aware that this battle would be difficult. He. Your Highness Holy Demoness sword is truly extraordinary. It seems crafted from the bones of ancient sages, and its quality even surpasses that of a true divinity spirit treasure. Unfortunately, that sword will not bring you any miracles today. Your Highness, why must you be enemies with me? If you are willing to pledge an oath to me and dual cultivate with me, then we can work together to seek out the secrets of eternal life. How about it? As the Great Flood Crown Prince finished speaking, he casually swept his eyes over Lin Ming, a sinister and cold light flashing deep in his pupils. Shang Mei was renowned for being the number 1 woman to exist in the entirety of the Dark Abyss. If one could obtain her and dual cultivate with her, then the benefits to one's cultivation would be incredible. As for Lin Ming, he was the fiancé Shang Mei had chosen. If he wanted to become one with Shang Mei, he naturally had to eliminate Lin Ming first. No matter how talented Lin Ming was, what mattered in a life or death battle was one's absolute strength. He was fully confident he could kill Lin Ming. Lin Ming maintained his calm as he rapidly analyzed the strength of the Great Flood Crown Prince. If he were to face the Great Flood Crown Prince, then once battle erupted, he would be forced to reveal his true self and it would no longer be possible to hide his identity. If that happened, then the situation would become troublesome. It would mean that he would have to kill all abyssals here who sought his true appearance. Moreover, there was Deep Echo. If Deep Echo sought his true self, would he possibly help the enemy instead? You, follow close to me once battle erupts. In the last moment I will use a secret technique and you will need to cover me. Because Lin Ming hadn't ever stated his name, Shang Mei simply referred to him as you. Hearing Shang Mei's sound transmission, Lin Ming's thoughts stirred. Indeed, Shang Mei followed the Soul Emperor all this time. In a crucial moment she should have some sort of life-saving card. Unless it was as a last resort, Lin Ming didn't want to reveal his true self, because if he did there would be far too many new problems. All sorts of thoughts raced through Lin Ming's mind. And at this time, there was a far-off cry. Everyone was startled. They turned towards the direction of the sound and what they saw left their scalps tingling. In the few breaths of time before now, two Empyreans that didn't belong to the Deep Alliance or Flood Alliance wished to take advantage of the time they were engaged with each other to be the first ones to delve into the lake. They wanted to quietly search for treasure as well as avoid the slaughter between the two sides. But when they stepped onto the shore of the lake, the seemingly ordinary swampy ground, one of the Empyrean abyssals stepped on something and a black fog rose up that enveloped him. In just a short breath of time, while this abyssal was violently shivering, the scales on his originally fierce body began to fall off and his towering and strong body started dissolving into bloody water that splashed onto the ground. The Empyrean abyssal melted away. All that remained was a head that stared wide-eyed into the skies, filled with panic. But soon this head also dissolved. Up until the moment he died, this abyssal didn't make a single sound, it was only his companion that cried out. An Empyrean-level abyssal had died in such an inexplicable manner, simply melting away into nothing. This was just far too macabre a sight. This is... The surviving Empyrean-level abyssal mumbled with a paper-white face. He didn't even dare to take a deep breath. Slowly, he cautiously stepped backwards, wanting to withdraw from this murderous, swampy land that seemed as if it came from hell. After all, this Empyrean had survived many life or death situations in his time. He was well aware that if he didn't maintain his calm but instead turned tail to run, then his death might come that much sooner. One small step, another small step, just as he was about to leave the edge of the swampy ground, his foot seemed to step into some pit and he tumbled backwards. With a cry of alarm, something seemed to grab onto his ankle from below and savagely pull him down. Ah! This Empyrean-level abyssal emitted a miserable shout. But soon his body sank into the swamp, and in just a breath of time his horrified shouts were also submerged. After a little bit more time, bones began to slowly float up. These bones still maintained the shape of someone struggling, they were the bones of the Empyrean-level abyssal that just died. This sort of feeling was like someone had been instantly eaten up with only bones remaining, leaving one frightened beyond compare. What is that? Seeing this scene, all the abyssals present, even the inordinately arrogant Great Flood Crown Prince, couldn't help but feel their hearts racing in their chests. They had just probed whatever this underground existence was, but they still didn't manage to discover just what it was that silently ate up two Empyrean-level abyssals. And these Empyrean-level abyssals were both proud elites of the Dark Abyss. But from start to finish, they were eaten and spit back out as quickly as cherries. That mysterious underground existence absolutely possessed strength above that of a true divinity-level abyssal. As for what the exact rank was, no one could confirm. All abyssals present held their breath for a time. In their minds, this calm underground world was becoming a dark land filled with horrifying terrors. In particular, the abyssals with Empyrean levels of strength regretted their impulsiveness to fly into the underground crack. Some abyssals gulped and subconsciously drew back from the direction of the lake. If it was them who rashly approached the lake just now, then the ones who turned into bones and bloody water would have been them. The great Flood Crown Prince's complexion darkened. Even he felt pressured in such a situation. This was only near the shores of the lake, and yet such a terrifying existence was here. Then, what would be at the bottom of the lake? Even if a dreadful existence appeared from the bottom of the lake that could easily slaughter him, the great Flood Crown Prince would still not be surprised. After all, this hidden land had existed for over 100 billion years. Moreover, the one who left this land behind was likely the demon god of legends. As for what would evolve in this land through a span of 100 billion years, no one knew. Thinking of this, the great Flood Crown Prince and other abyssals didn't dare to fight Lin Ming and Shang Mei yet. Even if the great Flood Crown Prince was confident that he could slay Lin Ming and Shang Mei, it would still require him to use up a considerable amount of energy. If several monsters leapt out towards him once he was weakened, he would simply become their dessert. Moreover, a fight between several true divinities would surely affect the surroundings. The two Empyreans just then had only reached the lake shore to alarm one of the monsters. If their fight caused the heavens and earth to shake, then perhaps even the monsters at the bottom of the lake would be stirred up. If a crowd of enraged monsters suddenly rose up, then their fates could be imagined. You still want to fight? Shang Mei coldly stared at the great Flood Crown Prince, her eyes shimmering and her voice decisive. The bone sword in her hand glittered. If there was a fight, then she would naturally accompany them until the end. The great Flood Crown Prince frowned. He coldly snorted and finally said, "Consider yourselves lucky. I will allow you to live this time. Of course, the premise is that you all don't turn into bloody water." The great Flood Crown Prince waved his hand and brought the others behind him to leave. "Your Highness the Crown Prince, what are we to do?" A true divinity-level abyssal asked from beside the great Flood Crown Prince. "Let them live for now. At a key moment we might be able to use them as shields. First we will search the area for lucky chances and potential dangers. Once we have determined our situation, then it still won't be late to destroy them. And that lake? We certainly must go in to take a look. There is at least a 70 to 80% chance that this mystic realm is related to the demon god. If we enter a mountain of treasures and return empty-handed, then what is the point of cultivating martial arts?" Hearing the words of the great Flood Crown Prince, many abyssals felt a chill run down their spines. They looked at the dark gray lake, and to them it now looked like the jaws of a wild beast that were opened wide, alarming to the mind. As for the lake waters, they blocked out their sense, no one knew just what lay inside. Chapter 2146, The Lake Shore of Dripping Blood. "Hey, the several of you come over here." The great Flood Crown Prince and his party stood in front of this killing lake. Suddenly, he turned his head and beckoned towards several Empyrean-level abyssals in the distance. These Empyrean-level abyssals came from small influences. They didn't belong to the Flood Alliance, nor were they part of the Deep Alliance. As these abyssals saw the great Flood Crown Prince wave at them, their complexions suddenly turned extremely ugly. Because the great crack in the earth had opened and closed so quickly, many abyssals had rushed down in a hot-headed decision. They never expected that they would be faced with such a situation underground. "I told you all to come here, didn't you hear me?" The great Flood Crown Prince's voice turned chilly. The several Empyrean abyssals wore gloomy faces as they walked towards the great Flood Crown Prince. When facing true divinity-level masters like Lin Ming and Shang Mei, the great Flood Crown Prince still held a measure of wariness against them. After all, wanting to kill a true divinity-level master wasn't easy at all. But against these Empyrean-level abyssals, the great Flood Crown Prince could kill them in an instant. Thus, the Empyrean-level abyssals didn't resist, because doing so would only mean that death approached them faster. The several Empyrean-level abyssals trembled as they walked in front of the great Flood Crown Prince. They already guessed just what would happen. What sort of expressions do you all have? I just want to cooperate with you. The Great Flood Crown Prince said with a lingering smile. Come, we will move forwards together. If we find anything good, then we will divide it according to the number of people. It is an absolutely fair condition. How could these Empyrean abyssals possibly believe such words? One of the abyssals dryly laughed and said, Crown Prince, Your Highness, please don't joke with us. How could we dare to struggle with you for lucky chances? This lake is likely a secret land left behind from the ancient era 100 billion years ago. With such a mystical trove, how could the likes of us possibly have the luck to enjoy it? Only someone as wonderful and fortunate as Your Highness could possibly be worthy of such a thing. As for us, we only rush down here in a moment of hot-headedness. We will immediately disappear from your sight. A clever abyssal said, bowing as he drew backwards. The Great Flood Crown Prince's complexion turned cold and killing intent flashed in his eyes. You sure speak enough garbage. The Great Flood Crown Prince's face changed as his manner turned hostile. Demon power erupted from his body as he stretched out a hand and ruthlessly caught the retreating abyssal. The Great Flood Crown Prince's strength was considered at the peak of middle true divinities. He wasn't someone that ordinary middle Empyreans could deal with. This Empyrean-level abyssal was an overbearing ruler of his own influence, but in the hands of the Great Flood Crown Prince he was as powerless as a chicken, simply unable to put up a struggle. Crown Prince, Your Highness, you, This middle Empyrean cried out in alarm as he was flung forwards by the Great Flood Crown Prince. You, walk with us. Stay 100 feet ahead of me. I will make an oath on my demon heart that if we can take away the treasures here and safely return, then I will leave a part of it to you. But if you try to play tricks with me or defy me, then I will kill you. Now, choose which road you wish to take. The Great Flood Crown Prince icily said. After the abyssal heard these words, his complexion turned as pale as a corpse that had been dead for 3 days. Safely return? Leave a part of the treasures to him? Did this possibility even exist? Currently, he had been tossed forwards as a stone to explore the path ahead. In this underground world where killing intent overflowed from all around, he was nothing but cannon fodder, and those 2 abyssal Empyreans who had melted away into bones and blood were the best examples. You. Although this abyssal's previous words seemed extremely undignified and servile, the truth was that he also had a fierce nature hidden in his bones. How could he endure such a humiliating death? Ha! Don't be in such a hurry to refuse me. You should be an elder from the Apocalypse sect, right? Hearing the Great Flood Crown Prince suddenly mention his sect, the Empyrean-level abyssal's complexion changed. He was about to deny this when the Great Flood Crown Prince smiled and said, There is no need to try and hide it. When I grabbed you just now, I probed your cultivation method and noticed that you cultivate the Apocalypse sect's apocalyptic devil arts. Your clan is also in the Apocalypse sect. If you obediently listen to me today, then even if you die, when I make it out of here someday, I will surely compensate your Apocalypse sect. But if you disobey me, I will annihilate your Apocalypse sect instead. The Great Flood Crown Prince's words were incomparably domineering. The Apocalypse sect's Empyrean elder was so mad that he shook from rage. I will give you one last chance. Not only can I destroy your Apocalypse sect, but I can also make you suffer pain worse than death. Even if you don't submit to me, I still have ways to replace you in exploring the path ahead, and it's only that it will be just a little bit more troublesome to me. The Great Flood Crown Prince's voice became increasingly cold. It seemed he had reached the end of his patience. Lin Ming listened from behind, quietly astonished. In the dark abyss, being weaker only meant to be freely oppressed. That abyssal who had been grabbed was forced into a helpless situation and made to explore the way forwards. The Great Flood Crown Prince and his group followed from a distance. There were also some Empyrean-level abyssals from smaller guilds that followed with aggrieved complexions. Without a doubt, once that abyssal in the front had the bad luck of randomly dying somehow, the next to stand in his place would be one of them. The group quietly walked forwards. The atmosphere was so tense and constrained that it seemed as if someone could squeeze water from it. "We will also go," Xiang Mei said after a moment of thought. She clearly didn't want to give up on whatever secrets there were in this lake. She looked at Lin Ming, asking for his suggestion. Lin Ming nodded. "We should release some of the power of demon gods that we absorbed and fully extend our senses. Since this energy comes from the same source, there should be a connection between it. If there really is danger, we should be able to perceive some clues." "Good. Everyone be wary." Xiang Mei nodded and released some of the power of demon gods she absorbed. The abyssals around her followed suit. At this time, the Great Flood Crown Prince's group was now a mere 100 feet away from that killing lake. At this distance, the pressure was even more intense. Moreover, the abyssals could feel a rich death energy, one that was rank with the smell of blood, as if this lake they faced was a blood pond from hell. I. The abyssal leading the way turned paper white. With every step he took, it was like he walked over the precipice of death. His forehead was already dripping with sweat. This killing lake was simply far too strange, and the ways one could die were too pitiful. 90 feet. 80 feet. 70 feet. They approached a step at a time, each abyssal raising their guard as high as they could. All the way to 20 feet, 10 feet, 3 feet, that abyssal leading the way would soon touch the lake waters. Although he was frightened so badly his complexion was like that of a dying man, he had extremely good luck and still hadn't died. Could this so-called killing lake in truth only be dangerous in that part of the swampy ground? And in that swampy area there was some horrifying existence lying in wait, but the other areas weren't dangerous? This thought flashed through the minds of some abyssals. They even guessed that this killing lake had some guardian demon beast, and as long as they avoided it they might be able to safely enter the mystic realm left behind by the demon god. Soon, the leading abyssal reached the edge of the killing lake. The abyssals, following behind, paused their steps. This was the crucial moment. They needed to test and determine whether or not this lake was dangerous in itself. Perhaps this lake water was corrosive enough to melt away anything, and any abyssal that jumped in would turn into a pile of bones. "Reach out your hand and test it," the Great Flood Crown Prince coldly ordered. The leading abyssal clenched his teeth. Then, he first used a sword and gently dipped it in the lake water. Besides light ripples, nothing else happened. After pulling out the sword, the blade also emerged unscathed. The abyssal felt slightly relieved upon seeing this. After a moment of hesitation, he took out a container to remove a little water from the lake and analyze whether it was dangerous or not. But at this moment, a miserable cry rang out from behind him. "Ah!" In a situation where everyone was highly tensed, whether it was abyssals or humans, it was easy for anyone to cry out. Several abyssals were originally standing stably on the ground. But then, they felt the earth soften beneath them and their feet plunged into the ground. Then they felt a strength that none of them could resist suddenly pull down their bodies, dragging them below. "Damn it!" The Great Flood Crown Prince was enraged. The abyssal leading the way was fine, but the larger force behind had been ambushed instead. It seemed that this mysterious underground existence had purposefully let go of the little fish up ahead to catch the larger group behind. Clang! In the Great Flood Crown Prince's hand, the saber engraved with a ghost head rang out as it emerged from its sheath, roughly slashing down onto the earth. Demon power swelled up like a raging sea tide. Bang! With a loud explosion, the divine iron hard lake shore was sundered by the Great Flood Crown Prince's saber. Muddy stones blew into the air, and the 4 or 5 Empyrean-level abyssals that were dragged into the ground were suddenly forcefully blown out again by this strength. However, of those Empyrean abyssals that were dragged into the ground just now, one could see that their bodies had been melted away in multiple areas, leaving nothing behind but white bones. Their deaths were only a matter of time. Chapter 2147, Storm. This is... Looking at the several abyssals blown back up that were soon to die, the great Flood Crown Prince's complexion turned as cold as a 10,000-year-old glacier. Right beneath his nose, his subordinates had been killed by some unknown existence, and from beginning to end he never realized just what had done it. The several abyssals that were blown back up by the great Flood Crown Prince's saber continued to howl in pain and misery. However, their bodies seemed to be stained with some corrosive liquid that continued to melt away at their bodies. Soon their voices were utterly silenced. The several abyssals had turned into a pile of bones, and the bloody pus that formed from their dissolved bodies also sank into the ground. Lin Ming watched all of this with a frown. He had spread his sense underground, yet he also didn't discover just what existence had killed those Empyrean abyssals. How strange! Shang Mei muttered. For a time, she looked at the lake with hesitation. Perhaps rashly rushing in wasn't a wise choice. Even if there was some world-shocking lucky chance, it still might be a thoroughly planned dead-end trap. Would the demon god's tomb have such a trap? What would be the goal of the one who established such a trap? It shouldn't be to intentionally kill off any successors that came here, right? All these thoughts raced through Shang Mei's mind. She couldn't imagine just what matters occurred in the years when the demon god's tomb was being formed. Perhaps this used to be a mystic realm with lucky chances, but afterwards a trap evolved from within it. Let us wait a moment and see if that great Flood Crown Prince retreats or advances. We still haven't managed to find out anything about this underground existence. As Shang Mei spoke, the several Empyrean abyssals beside her wiped off their dripping sweat. Waiting is also good, waiting is also good. These abyssals were well aware that their side was far weaker than that of the great Flood Crown Prince. Even if there was some world-shocking lucky chance in the lake, the most likely conclusion was that the great Flood Crown Prince would take the greatest benefits. As for abyssals that might die, it would most likely be them. At this time, Lin Ming suddenly said, "Perhaps there isn't anything underground at all." His words left everyone stunned. What do you mean?" Deep Echo asked. "Perhaps this world itself can devour life and swallow flesh and blood. Those abyssal Empyreans that were eaten were not ambushed by some underground monster, but by the earth itself, and that Killing Lake is similarly part of this world, or even the center of this world." Lin Ming spookily said, his words quiet and chilling. "The world itself could swallow the life and flesh and blood of others? Why would you say that?" Deep Echo's tone changed. In the face of such a speculation, even a true divinity would find it difficult to remain relaxed. "It's just my personal feeling, there isn't any actual basis behind it." Everything Lin Ming said had only come from his own feelings. He always thought that there was something off with this world, something evil about it. Feeling. Shang Mei took a deep breath and quietly traced the bone sword in her hands. She also felt this entire situation was ominous. But now, they could only continue forwards. The original entrance to this mystic realm had been sealed away, and wanting to find another wouldn't be easy. The great Flood Crown Prince also seemed to realize this point. Without any hesitation he ordered the Empyrean level abyssal leading the way, "You, enter the lake." "What?" Hearing this order, the Empyrean abyssal was incensed. This was the same as ordering him to his death. Humph! The great Flood Crown Prince was already in a poor mood. Seeing that this Empyrean abyssal seemed as if he wanted to revolt, the great Flood Crown Prince grasped out at the void and formed a giant demon claw. This demon claw grabbed the Empyrean abyssal and picked him up. "Ah!" The abyssal wailed out loud. The great Flood Crown Prince's demon claw contained a profound and exquisite force field that imprisoned the Empyrean abyssal's energy and movement. Without any ability to resist, the abyssal was tossed into the lake waters like a sack of grain. Pang! The lake water blew open, like a dumpling being tossed into a pot of boiling water. The abyssal cried out loud. He tumbled about in the lake, struggling to rise up. All the watching abyssals held their breath as they looked on intently with supreme concentration. If this abyssal were melted away into bones by the lake waters, or if there was some unknown existence that rushed out from the lake all of a sudden and dragged this abyssal below, or perhaps even eating the abyssal whole, then no one would be surprised. But this abyssal continued to struggle for a long time and was completely alright. Let alone dying, his scales hadn't even fallen off. He's still fine after falling into the lake? Some abyssal commented. Wait longer. The Great Flood Crown Prince was extremely calm. Just because something didn't happen at the start didn't mean nothing would happen later. He kept his force field locked onto the abyssal, making it so that he couldn't rise back up from the lake. But after several breaths of time, he still wasn't satisfied. He grabbed another Empyrean abyssal from a small influence that was standing beside him and tossed him into the lake waters. With another cry of fear and alarm, 2 abyssals flailed in the lake. The lake waters churned and the waves grew larger and larger. But nothing happened to the 2 abyssals, and one of them even loudly cursed out at the Great Flood Crown Prince. This abyssal vented his anger with curses, and the Great Flood Crown Prince's complexion darkened. But at this time, he couldn't be bothered with the babblings of cannon fodder. He wanted to toss more Empyrean-level abyssals into the water, but just as he was about to do so, something seemed to bubble up from the center of that dark gray lake. Gudong! Gudong! Giant air bubbles rose up from the bottom of the lake at an ever-increasing pace, becoming increasingly dense, as if some super monster was about to rush out. All of the abyssals felt their hearts tighten. As for the 2 abyssals in the lake, their faces were paper white. If a monster were to come from this lake, then the first ones to suffer disaster would be them. They wouldn't even be enough to work as an appetizer. Pang! With a loud explosion, a giant column of water split upwards from the lake. Then, a storm stirred up on the surface of the lake, causing raging waves that swelled out in all directions. Many abyssals were shocked. Such a storm covered the skies and earth, seeming as if it would swallow them all. Without a need for words, all abyssals started to rapidly retreat from this storm. But at the same time, the storm suddenly intensified in strength. An irresistible tearing strength emerged, and in the center of this lake space violently trembled as if it couldn't resist the strength. Space is trembling? Many abyssals looked at the space trembling in the center of the lake, panic-stricken. It had to be known that the space within the demon god's tomb was incredibly stable, so how could it possibly tremble like this? Then, just as they thought this, a horrifying scene occurred. The trembling of space grew even stronger. Then, a small hole was torn open. Although this opening was only the size of a fist, it was still torn open. A terrifying strength had ripped open the space within the demon god's tomb. How is this possible? This thought flashed through the minds of all abyssals watching. And then, without any time to react or think, an irresistible vortex swept out from that torn space and all abyssals were sucked into it. Bang! The surface of the lake blew open. The Great Flood Crown Prince, Lin Ming, Xiang Mei, all abyssals sank to the bottom of the lake. In that moment, Lin Ming could feel whistling in his ears. The high speed he was being drawn in had caused his body to form friction with the lake water, making him extremely hot. This lake was far deeper than he had imagined. Although he was sinking at such a speed, he still couldn't see the bottom of the lake. Slowly, Lin Ming discovered that his consciousness seemed to be separating from his body. For a time, the surroundings turned blurry. Lin Ming was startled. If his consciousness were to leave his body at this time, then it would undoubtedly be incredibly dangerous. But, beneath the pull of that massive tearing strength, he felt as if his soul would be torn apart. It was simply unbearable. If this were to continue, then his spiritual sea would fall into illusion. Lin Ming's mind quaked. He possessed the eternal soul, and thus he always had full confidence in the intensity of his soul. Even so, he couldn't resist this force, proving just how horrifyingly formidable it was. Magic Cube. Suddenly, a bright light dazzled in Lin Ming's mind. He immediately connected his divine sense with the magic cube. Suddenly, the mystical and ancient aura of the magic cube poured into his spiritual sea. Lin Ming's consciousness gradually woke up a little. He barely managed to move his eyes and look all around him. The surroundings were pitch black, but this couldn't block Lin Ming's vision. Still, what he saw left his heart sinking to the pit of his stomach. Beside him, the Empyrean Abyssals, as well as Deep Echo and Shang Mei, were already in an unconsciousness condition. Chapter 2148, Shang Mei's Past Life, A. Holy Demoness, can you hear me? Lin Ming tried to send Shang Mei a true essence sound transmission, but he didn't obtain any response. At this time, Shang Mei's complexion was pale and her eyes were shut tight. Her eyelashes quietly shivered. It was clear that Shang Mei, as well as the many abyssals all around, weren't able to resist that massive soul-tearing strength just now, and their minds had fallen into illusion. This is... Lin Ming's brows pressed together. If he hadn't been for the magic cube, then he feared that he too wouldn't have been able to withstand that strength. Lin Ming noticed that many abyssals had pained expressions, as if they were experiencing something terrifying. At this time, as the vortex continued to spin, all of the abyssals were scattered farther and farther apart from each other. Lin Ming watched helplessly as the abyssals of the Deep Alliance as well as Shang Mei were all flung increasingly far in their entranced state. As for deeper within, he could no longer see the abyssals of the Flood Alliance. Just what was that soul-tearing strength? Lin Ming grimaced. After a moment, he loosened the connection between his soul and the magic cube. In that instant, the soul-tearing strength roared at him once more. Lin Ming's divine soul was held by the magic cube. Slowly, he allowed his consciousness to free itself. Currently, Lin Ming could be said to be in a half-dream, half-awake state. As long as he wanted to, he could plunge his thoughts into the magic cube to free himself from the condition, but right now he wanted to know just what mysteries were contained in this mystical soul-tearing strength. Gradually, Lin Ming felt his body become increasingly light. The endless lake waters around him vanished, and in the next moment he arrived in a beautiful world lit up with dappled sunlight. This is... He was stunned. He could see a giant structure before him as well as the signboard above the complex that had the words 7 Profound written on it in large, flowing characters. 7 Profound Martial House? Upon recalling the name of this martial house, Lin Ming felt as if everything that happened was a lifetime ago. This was the beginning of Lin Ming's road of martial arts. After tracing back to the start, this was something that happened over 12,000 years ago. 12,000 years. To long-lived martial artists that might live for hundreds of millions of years, 12,000 years was only an extremely short period in their life. For some, a long period of seclusion might take 10,000 to 20,000 years. But to Lin Ming, these 12,000 years were an incomparably distant matter. Could what this soul-tearing strength be dragging back our dust-laden old dreams from deep in my memories? It wants me to relive these events? Lin Ming looked up at the signboard of the 7 Profound Martial House in this dream and began to walk forwards. As he expected, he saw many familiar people from the past. Zhu Yan, Lan Yunhua, Xin Zai, Xin Xingxuan. There were even some characters that were hidden deep in his memory and that he normally wouldn't recall. For instance, that girl in the 7 Profound Martial House who he always had a favorable impression towards, but whom he had lost news of later, by Ging Yun. Lin Ming watched from the viewpoint of an outsider, calmly looking at the life he had lived. He gradually understood that after entering this killing lake, the soul-tearing strength that acted on them perhaps might be some sort of test on a martial artist's divine soul. If a person's mind wasn't firm, then it was easy to fall into this dreamland and never be able to disentangle themselves from it. Lin Ming's mind stirred. The scenes of the 7 Profound Martial House shattered, and then the experiences from the South Sea Demon region came flooding in. Familiar characters, familiar locations, all sorts of scenes took the stage. He saw Divine Phoenix Island, saw the invasion of the South Sea Demon region. He saw himself entering Divine Phoenix mystic realm, saw himself being mistakenly assumed as dead, saw that Ouyang Boyan who had a grudge with him move against Qin Shixuan and try to have her killed on Blood Demon Island. After emerging from that Divine Phoenix mystic realm, he learned of this news and in his fury he rushed out on a vermilion bird, passing hundreds of thousands of miles to reach Blood Demon Island and save Qin Shixuan. This was one of Lin Ming's deepest and most profound memories. When he successfully rescued Qin Shixuan from the jaws of death, this allowed him to truly understand how happy he was to not lose someone he loved. However, in these dreamland memories, what replayed itself was actually completely different. He saw himself fly to Blood Demon Island. The moment he found Qin Shixuan, a blood demon rushed at her, opening its ravenous jaws and biting down on her neck. At this moment, the despairing Qin Shixuan saw him. As she did, all sorts of emotion flooded her face. Love, joy, regret. Lin Ming's heart tightened and he found it impossible to remain indifferent. He wanted to move to save Qin Shixuan, but he found that his speed became incomparably slow. From a true divinity level of strength, he found that he had dropped down to that mere Hotian realm he had been at when he first saved Qin Shixuan. Like this, he could only stare blankly on as that blood demon bit down on Qin Shixuan's neck. Blood gushed out. All the emotions on Qin Shixuan's face froze, as if time itself had come to a standstill. The smiling Qin Shixuan and the blood that dripped down from her formed a sharp contrast. No! Lin Ming cried out in alarm, in fear. In the next moment, Lin Ming fiercely bit down on his tongue to sober himself. This is false. Lin Ming took a deep breath, violently gasping. He told himself this so that he could rid himself of that horrifying dream just now. In the depths of his mind, Lin Ming knew that what he saw wasn't real. Moreover, his divine soul had always been stabilized with that faint connection with the magic cube. Even so, when Lin Ming saw that scene just now, it was like he had personally experienced it, and in his anger and sorrow he had nearly fallen into illusion, unable to drag himself out. What a terrifying dreamland! Lin Ming was bewildered. Even he had barely managed to avoid falling into illusion. Then, what about the other abyssal sphere? Lin Ming still didn't withdraw himself from the dreamland. He wanted to take a good look for himself and what this strange soul-tearing strength was going to do. Then, scenes continued to replay themselves. These scenes were all things that Lin Ming had truly experienced in the past. However, instead of how they had truly ended, everything took a turn for the worse. When competing for the Nirvana Dragon Root in Demon God Imperial Palace, Lin Ming saw his schemes be seen through by Xian Wuji. As a result, he was executed where he stood. In the bronze temple facing Yang Yun, Lin Ming saw his body being seized by him. From that point on, his body was possessed by Yang Yun and that strange and sinister smile hung on his face from then on. Then, facing Tian Mingzi in the Azura Road, Lin Ming saw himself being the one that was killed. Halfway through his life adventures, he saw the magic cube being discovered. He fled through the world, but eventually he was discovered by someone and his soul was pulled out and refined. He even saw the good fortune Saint Sun defeat him and take Xiao Moxian for his own. He saw the good fortune Saint Sun brutally ravage Xiao Moxian. In that moment, Lin Ming's soul nearly fell into illusion once more. Pang! Lin Ming punched out at the scene before him and the diabolically grinning good fortune Saint Sun shattered into fragments. Lin Ming gasped for breath. The scenes in this dreamland were of things he feared the most. If he weren't for the magic cube, Lin Ming didn't know if he would have been able to withstand all of this. What a fierce dreamland! I have the eternal soul, so I should be fine for now, but what about the others? For instance, Shang Mei. Lin Ming remembered Shang Mei, this woman that he wasn't sure was a friend or enemy. As he thought of her, he inevitably worried. If Shang Mei didn't have any heart demons, then it would be good. But if she did have a heart demon, then she would be in incredible danger in this soul dreamland. Lin Ming could be called someone with a firm will and iron determination. But, even he didn't dare say he didn't have any heart demons. The so-called heart demons were things that a martial artist longed for the most, or feared the most. The stronger these obsessions were, the stronger the heart demons were. Moreover, the more powerful a martial artist, the more formidable these heart demons would become. Once these types of dreamlands appeared, or in a critical moment when trying to make a breakthrough, these heart demons might appear to haunt the martial artist and cause problems. If they suddenly manifested, it was possible that a martial artist could go crazy or fall into depravity. Xiang Mei, would she have heart demons? Lin Ming mumbled. He didn't know why, but a foreboding premonition suddenly rose in his heart. In the dark gray lake waters, the vast vortex continued to wildly spin about. A peerless woman in black clothes was being spun about in these lake waters. Her thick and luscious hair fell about her, fanning out in the lake waters like a black rose in full bloom but also wilting. At this time, Xiang Mei's complexion was pale white, without the least bit of red remaining. After experiencing the complete 9 reincarnations and tempering her divine soul for all this time, she had become incomparably formidable in this aspect. In fact, when it came to the soul, she wasn't much worse than Lin Ming. However, her heart demons were also incomparably powerful. In her divine soul, there were far too many things she longed for and feared. In a giant circular building similar to an area, a 7 or 8-year-old little girl was standing in the center. She had bright black eyes and her little arms seemed carved from jade. Her face was fresh and cute like a ripe apple, a completely lovable little child. On her face, if one searched carefully, they could find shadows of the current Xiang Mei. Such a lovable little girl actually had a face stained with blood. Her arms were also covered with blood. Her small jade-like arms were grasping a large sword. This sword was longer than the little girl was tall. She only barely managed to hold onto it with both hands. Along the sword's thick hilt, blood continued to drip downwards. On the ground around the little girl was scattered pieces of flesh and puddles of blood. Organs, incomplete corpses, this area resembled a slaughterhouse. The little girl lowered her head and supported herself on the large sword. She gasped for breath. "Are you ready to continue?" At this time, a faint voice echoed out. The little girl was startled up. She looked up and from beneath her bangs, a doll-like face was revealed. From between her eyebrows, a single vertical red mark appeared, like the petal of a flower. "I am tired," the little girl muttered with difficulty. But at this time, from not too far away, an old man appeared. This old man was thin, but his build was naturally tall and wide. His face was deep and profound, and he emitted a majestic aura. He wasn't a spiritus, nor was he a saint, he was someone of the primal god race. On the battlefield, the enemy will not give you time to rest. As the old man spoke, he gently waved his hand. From not too far away, an iron gate was opened. From behind this iron gate, black life forms wrapped in chains appeared. These were abyssals. Moreover, because of some sort of reason, these abyssals had lost their minds and had turned crazy. Roar! Dozens of abyssals roared out together. As they looked at the little girl, their eyes were filled with bloodthirst and killing intent. Chapter 2149, Xiang Mei's Past Life, B. Of these abyssal demons, the vast majority were originally of the kind that possessed low intelligence. After being stimulated by a secret technique, they had gone crazy and were now no different from wild beasts. Seeing this little girl, these abyssals instantly became ferocious. Ayo! The crowd of abyssals howled as they rushed towards this little girl. Seeing these vicious and murderous abyssals, the little girl clenched her teeth. She wielded her sword and brought it slashing down. Sword light sparkled as abyssal after abyssal was cut apart by her. Countless corpses littered the ground. Blood dyed her face, her clothes, drenched her entire body in the thickly rank smell of blood, as if she were someone that had crawled out from the blood ponds of hell. For such a cute little girl to be drenched in thick blood, this formed an incredible visual impact. It was hard to imagine that the surrounding scene had originated from her hands. The old man looked on indifferently as the abyssals rushed forwards. He only waved his hand and another group of wild abyssals flushed out of another gate. These abyssals were even more formidable than the previous ones. They howled out as they raced towards the little girl. Year after year, the little girl experienced endless and untold amounts of slaughter. Many times, because her enemies were too strong, she was nearly torn to shreds by the abyssals. Or sometimes she was severely wounded, suffocating on the verge of death. But each time, as she lay dying, she would be put into a pot of boiling medicinal solution, suffering agonizing torment as she slowly recovered from her wounds. She grew stronger and stronger, and her cultivation grew higher and higher. Every inch of her flesh experienced inexhaustible tempering. From a young child she slowly grew up into a young girl. At some unknown point, the singular red mark between her eyebrows became two. Like two flower petals pressed in between her eyebrows. Afterwards, she was tossed alone onto a vast wild plain. Without pills, without supplies, she ventured through the wild plains on her own, encountering countless ancient great beasts and slaughtering them. Without pills, she gathered everything she needed by herself. When she was injured, she treated herself. She passed 100 million miles through a great desolate land, killing innumerable wild beasts all the while. At this time, she had already become a woman whose beauty was capable of causing the downfall of nations. Her strength was outstanding. In the primal god race, her status was like the moon in the night sky, brilliant and glorious. The flower petals between her eyebrows turned to three. When the third one appeared, she was locked on the reef of a small island deep in the sea. This small island was the place where the bones of an ancient great emperor were buried. There was a giant force field that covered this land, and a normal martial artist would find it unbearable. But this young girl was locked onto the ground here using chains. With her slender and charming figure, she was tightly bound by these chains. The dark steel rings dug into her flesh and drew blood. On her beautiful body, fierce red marks were left behind. And behind her were the rocky reefs. These reefs were not made from ordinary stones, but from extraterrestrial divine stones. These stones dug into her back, like countless needles thrusting into her body. The chains weren't common chains either. They were dragon trapping chains refined by an array formation grandmaster. Not only could they bind the body, they could also lock in one's divine soul. In addition, with the pressure from the great emperor force field, from the very start the young girl found it nearly impossible to breathe. When the tides rose, infinite great waves would smash into her body. She withstood that crashing pain time and time again. And after the tide retreated, the blazing hot sun would burn her body. She lost all color. She lay there motionlessly, not even blinking her eyes, as if she had already become a jade statue. She withstood such monstrous suffering, silently enduring it, patiently waiting. No one came to check on her, and no one delivered food to her. She could only stare off into the distance and the horizon that was covered with thick fog and the limitless sea and boundless sky that spread out before her. As if she were already forgotten here by the world. If she wasn't able to free herself, then she would simply die here. Loneliness, despair, pain, such suffering could even make a brave man turn mad. At the start, the young girl felt extremely helpless. But slowly, she discovered remnants of the mysterious great emperor's laws. And she discovered that the roiling heaven and earth origin energy here was 100 times richer than the outside. She started to perceive the laws, day in and day out. Every morning she would lick the dark steel chains, drinking in the morning dew that had gathered on the cold metal. She would breathe in the purest power of the world here. She constantly saved her strength, constantly raised her strength. Until one day, as her strength rose higher and higher, she finally broke through her bottleneck and her strength rose to a whole new level. Like a phoenix bathing in the fires, on the verge of death, she experienced her own nirvanic rebirth. Bang! She smashed apart the iron chains that bound her body and blew apart the divine stones behind her. With a loud and clear cry, she blazed into the boundless blue skies. In that moment, she experienced another sublimation of her strength and experiences, another transformation. Amongst her contemporaries, there was already no one capable of competing with her strength. Battle, slaughter, cultivation. Her enemies ranged from abyssals to endless wild beasts, and back to infinite waves of abyssals. Although she had a beauty that could fell kingdoms, she had never once experienced the love between a man and woman. All she knew was blood. All she knew was fighting. And everything that occurred to these peerless women flowed into Xiang Mei's inner world. As if this were a life she had experienced, an incomparably real life. However, this seemed to only be a dream that had nothing to do with Xiang Mei. Because in her memories, Xiang Mei simply couldn't find these scenes. Just who was the young girl in the dream? That beautiful woman had an appearance completely similar to that of Xiang Mei. And between her eyebrows, there was also the mark of a red lotus, that was the symbol of the 9 revolutions of reincarnation. As if she were dreaming, as if she were awake, Xiang Mei could no longer distinguish if she were Xiang Mei or the woman in this dream. After experiencing untold years, this dream woman's strength now stood at the highest levels of the universe. The red lotus between her eyebrows had long since reached perfection, and what Xiang Mei saw next left her gasping on her own breath. She saw in the limitless vast space, there was a floating dark continent. And on this continent were bones, endless bones. Some of these bones were in the shape of people, some were in the shape of fierce monsters, all sorts of wild beasts, and even some bones in the shape of god beasts that extended for thousands of miles. Of these skeletons, all of them emitted an incredibly terrifying aura. If the bones of a weakling were placed within, they would immediately be crushed into dust by the pressure. Without a doubt, only the remains of peerless powerhouses were on this dark continent. It was unimaginable just how so many peerless powerhouses had died here. Looking at the bones, one could see that they had died around the same time. From this, one could speculate that this was an incredibly brutal war that involved countless peerless powerhouses. The peerless woman stood above these endless bones, as if she were on another world. She was barefoot, wearing a long black dress that flowed down her like water. Divine brilliance poured from her, sprinkling down onto her body, shrouding her in a faint hazy glow. Her aura seemed to merge together with the one. In this brutal and savage world, she seemed completely out of place. In her life, she had experienced endless slaughter. But at this time she was like a single orchid in a profound canyon, ethereal and otherworldly, her snow-white skin untainted by mortal affairs. Even this dark and ominous battlefield that was covered in layers of killing intent seemed to have nothing to do with her. And at this time, in front of the woman, something appeared. This was a purple card. The small card was only the size of a palm. And carved on this card were countless strange and indecipherable marks. These marks were ancient and mystical. Just by looking at them, one felt as if their soul would fall within. The card was like a fluttering butterfly, flying around this peerless woman. The woman looked at this card. From within her bright eyes, infinite sorrow and regret seemed to appear. However, all these complex feelings eventually returned to peace and serenity. There was no longer any waves in her mood. The card fluttered about, slowly flying towards the peerless woman's forehead. Then, gently, it cut into the jade-like flesh of the woman's forehead. The 9-petal red lotus was torn apart by the purple card, instantly fading. Blood gushed out and all of it was absorbed by the purple card. Then, endless crimson light dyed this dark gray world. In that moment, the world seemed to regain all its color. Infinite life essence recklessly gushed out from the woman. More and more light blazed from the woman's body. Like a black phoenix burning itself, she dazzled with blinding brilliance. Because of this woman's brilliance, this dark world was filled with beautiful colors once more. The woman burned everything she was without reserve. The final flash of brilliance of her life seemed to turn into eternity. Chapter 2150, Heart Demon. The moment the dream woman turned into a brilliant flash of light, Xiang Mei felt as if a sword had been stabbed into her heart. With a stuffy cough, her divine soul suffered excruciating pain as if she was being torn asunder. In front of Xiang Mei, that dazzling divine light became increasingly strong, blotting out the skies. Like millions and billions of suns crashing down onto the world. That black continent melted away. And above that continent, the endless skeletons were sucked in by the strength, shattering and disintegrating. The force fields inherent within these skeletons, the energy emitted from these peerless powerhouses after they died, everything was swept up into that blinding brilliance, turning into a kaleidoscope of colors that swirled into a giant vortex. This vortex swallowed the continent, completely refining it. Endless runes came shrouding down. The earth seemed to turn into a magic tool. The purple card fluttered in the center of that continent, giant ripples of energy pulsating outwards. Then, as if it were being grasped by some great invisible hand, this continent was pushed towards another world, slowly suppressing it. For a time, infinite tracts of space were cracked. Horrifying space storms stirred up, but nothing was able to stop the advance of this continent. It was irresistible. In the blinding brilliance, the continent became increasingly thin as it was refined. However, the energy within was being compressed to an infinite degree. All the skeletons atop were refined, turned into endless fragments that tumbled about in the air. As for the energy of those skeletons, all of it fused together in the center of this continent, the purple card. This card seemed to be the center of all energy in the universe. As long as anything could be turned into energy, nothing was able to escape its control. These skeletons, whether it was life forms of the 33 heavens, god beasts, or even abyssal demons, whether it was the power of divinity, the power of demons, the power of monsters, all of it was entirely absorbed by the purple card. Finally, this continent turned into a giant wall of light that turned towards that mysterious dark world and ruthlessly came suppressing down on it. Bang! With an indescribable explosion, the world seemed to collapse. That giant and profound dark world that hid in the void trembled. It was like the apocalypse had arrived, as if the great shattering were beginning once more. In that moment, Xiang Mei's divine soul violently shook. She suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and the chaotic dream she saw shattered, turning into endless fragments. Her face was pale white and her entire body streamed with dripping sweat. Everything she experienced in that dream just now was far too real, as if she had lived tens of thousands of years in it. But when she woke up from that dream, it was as if only a mere moment had passed. She experienced inexhaustible scenes in that dream, but as she tried to recall them, they were somewhat blurry. Yet even though she already couldn't recall many of the scenes, Xiang Mei still deeply remembered those final moments. She remembered the dream woman burning away her life, refining those endless skeletons to forge the giant crystal wall with the purple card, and then maliciously suppressed the dark world with the crystal wall. That mysterious dark world gave off an incredibly familiar feeling to Xiang Mei. It was the Dark Abyss. And above the Dark Abyss lay the Eternal God Wall, a barrier that isolated the Dark Abyss from the 33 heavens. It was a wall that had existed there for 10 billion years. And in her dreams, Xiang Mei had actually witnessed the birth of the Eternal God Wall. The black-clothed woman burning away her life in a flash of brilliance, the suppression of the crystal wall, that apocalyptic scene, all of it became a mark that was forever branded in Xiang Mei's mind. She is. Xiang Mei took a deep breath and earnestly tried to recall what she remembered. She wanted to seek out how she was related to that mysterious woman in her dreams. However, just as she felt as if she had caught hold of something, she felt as if her spiritual sea was being torn apart once more. Such fiercely aching pain was like a heavy hammer that brutally smashed down on her head. She felt her legs soften and her surroundings turn dark. In the next moment her consciousness became blurry once more. She seemed to begin yet another long dream. Countless mixed scenes appeared in this dream, and she saw many familiar characters. Of these many faces, some were friendly, some were kind, some were disgusted, some were filled with hatred. And finally, a youth's face appeared, seeming as if it took up the entire dream. This youth had pale white skin and cloudy eyes, as if he were a dead man walking. Soul Emperor! Seeing this old youth, a cold light flashed in Sheng Mei's eyes. She was utterly unable to resist the Soul Emperor. But towards this evil man, what she felt the most was not fear, but hatred. Bang! A beam of divine thought burst out from between the Soul Emperor's eyes and crashed into Sheng Mei's inner world. Sheng Mei's mind shook and space tumbled about her. As she opened her eyes once more, she discovered she had arrived in a world where the heaven and earth origin energy was extremely thin, but a world that was also extremely peaceful. This is... As this world appeared, Sheng Mei felt something that nearly left her gasping for breath. This was the Skyspill continent, Lin Ming's hometown. Could it be? Sheng Mei's body quivered, as if she were living a waking nightmare. This was something hidden deep in her memories, a box she wasn't willing to open. Like a scar she couldn't bear to see, she simply couldn't face it. She dreaded experiencing this scene, she truly didn't want to. However, in this scene before her, what she feared the most slowly happened. She saw Lin Ming. At this time, Lin Ming was lying despondent on the ground of his home world, looking at Sheng Mei. At this moment, Sheng Mei wanted to withdraw, but she discovered that a flow of heat surged in her belly. This flow of heat spread through her limbs and bones. She turned around and saw that not too far away, there was an old tree that looked as if it were molded from a horned dragon. And on that old tree there had originally been 2 fruits. But these 2 fruits had already disappeared. Sheng Mei's heart shook. She certainly remembered preparing this fruit tree for Lin Ming. It originated from the dark abyss, a type of enchanted fruit that inflamed one's basest sexual desires. In the past, without a road to take, she had chosen to use these enchanted fruits. But now she didn't want to experience this scene once more. She revolved the strength in her body, wanting to drive out the medicinal strength of this fruit. But she discovered that no matter how she tried, she simply wasn't able to move any of the energy within her. As if this body wasn't her own. Sheng Mei took a deep breath and suddenly understood what was occurring. This was her dream, and ultimately her true self was only a wandering traveler through this dream. No matter what she tried to do, she couldn't change the dream. She could only stand here and experience it once more. If you are destined to be destroyed, then you might as well be destroyed by my hands. These were words that Sheng Mei once said to Lin Ming. These words reverberated in this dreamland, and as she heard them once more, she didn't know how she felt. She closed her eyes, not wanting to watch the following scene. But soon she felt her clothes disappear, and then, the movement of bodies. That was a masculine body unreservedly fusing with her own. This sort of strange feeling gradually blended together with the burning heat in her body, making her soul tremble. She never would have imagined that on this day, in her dream, she would experience this extremely profound memory once more. In the past, she too had eaten that enchanted aphrodisiac fruit of the dark abyss, and her consciousness had also turned blurry. Although she remembered that unforgettable touch, her experiences at the time had still be blurry. As if she were being mesmerized by an intoxicating spring dream, although she had reached the pinnacle of bliss, she had still done so in a half-awake, half-dream state. And the difference now was that Sheng Mei was experiencing all of this completely sober. She kept her eyes closed throughout. But the continuous impacts that seemed to strike at her soul continued to pass over that original pleasure from beginning to end. In her dream, besides not being able to control this body, she personally experienced everything. Beneath the medicinal properties of the fruit, she felt a wild joy that left her breathlessly enchanted. This was something she had never experienced before in her dry and repressed life. But at the same time, she also felt the confusion and pain hidden in the depths of this man's soul beneath her. His life source, his soul source, was being slowly weakened, drawn out from him. It was like watching a brilliant star slowly fading away. In particular, this fading man had an inextricably linked relationship with her. And his fall also came because of her. Without noticing it, Xiang Mei felt a crystal clear and cool tear fall down from the corner of her eye, breaking apart like a pearl as it landed. Chapter 2151, Soul Tear. Pa-ta. That crystalline teardrop fell onto Lin Ming's face and gently broke apart. In this confusing world, the sound of that teardrop was incomparably clear, like a sound that traveled through time and space. This was a soul tear. Some souls, when recalling their past pain and emotions, would leave behind tears. Seeing this shattering soul tear, Xiang Mei humorlessly smiled. She knew just how pale and useless this tear was in such a situation. Because what had happened could no longer be changed. Moreover, even if that time returned, the result would still be the same. Because the situation at that time had been a dead end for Lin Ming. In her lament, the joy she had felt in fusing together with Lin Ming once more slowly faded away. At this time, Xiang Mei's soul had gone completely quiet. She watched helplessly on as the only man in her life who had managed to stir up her love and hate started to slowly lose his soul and life source beneath her actions. He had turned incomparably weak, like a star that had burned itself away. In that moment, Xiang Mei felt as if her own soul had turned to ice. She looked at the deeply sleeping Lin Ming, who had already become crippled by now. She felt as if a knife were slowly digging away at her, cutting through her heart. In the final moments, she left behind a wisp of her source soul in Lin Ming. However, she knew that this wisp of her soul wasn't likely to play any useful function. This was equal to saying that Lin Ming was already done for. This was a man she had once wanted to leap out from this vortex of disaster with together. And now, she had personally destroyed him. Before anything could begin, it was already over. She quietly waited, her heart as desolate as a graveyard. In truth, she only waited for several hours, but to her they were like a billion years. At this time, the deeply sleeping Lin Ming quietly woke up. He looked at Xiang Mei and bitterly smiled. The grass was soft beneath them as a cool breeze blew past. The two looked at each other, this image captured in their minds for eternity. At some unknown time, Xiang Mei finally spoke up. These were words Xiang Mei had once said in the past. Now, she was listening to them once more as an outsider. Hate me. These didn't seem to be words directed towards Lin Ming, but words aimed at herself, torturous words that questioned herself and him. What reason do I have to hate you? If it wasn't for you, then I would have already been killed by soaring feather and would be nothing but an icy cold corpse. In fact, I could even say that without you I would never have left the soul world and would have already died to the great Brahmic God King. As they were back then as they were now, Lin Ming's every word was clearly remembered by Xiang Mei. She fell silent, listening to these words. Every word echoed in her ears, and she could even recall them exactly. Until Lin Ming said, "You really are willing to resort to any means possible. In order to cultivate the art of eternal life, you are even willing to use your body as a tool. In the mortal world there are women that can sell their bodies for money. And you, just what distinguishes you from them?" These words scolded Xiang Mei as a whore. In the past, they had stirred up great waves in her heart, but today they stirred up nothing. She simply sighed in sorrow. Perhaps there really was no difference. She also couldn't control her own fate, and her ending was equally sad. It was over. Xiang Mei knew that all of this was already predetermined. No matter how many times it repeated, the result would be the same. Then, Xiang Mei watched as she broke through the void, leaving the despondent and seemingly dead Lin Ming lying on the earth, as if there wasn't a single trace of life left within him. Her soul actually didn't follow her dream self in departing. Rather, she stayed in the Skyspill continent and gazed at Lin Ming. This left Xiang Mei shocked. How could this be? Xiang Mei didn't know why. But slowly, her heart trembled. She had been looking at Lin Ming in the Skyspill continent for several days already. She still hadn't left with her dream self. Faintly, something stirred up in her heart. Could it be? Could she see what Lin Ming experienced in the past? During that time, because of the existence of the Soul Emperor, she was simply unable to keep track of Lin Ming. Moreover, after she left the Skyspill planet, she went to the Dark Abyss. But now she had such an opportunity in her dream. In this dream, was everything that was occurring truly what happened to Lin Ming? As Shang Mei suddenly thought of this, she finally slowly shook her head. Perhaps these were only assumptions that her mind came up with. No matter how wise and amazing this demon god's tomb mystic realm was impossible for it to learn of Lin Ming's memories and let her stand near him. Even so, Shang Mei still continued to gaze quietly on. She wanted to see what Lin Ming had experienced, even if it were all in her imagination. The years changed. Spring went and fall came. Shang Mei quietly waited beside Lin Ming, like a ghost defending a grave. And in this wilderness, Lin Ming seemed to fall into a permanent state of sleep. Fall leaves and dust fell upon his body, and even grass grew over him. Shang Mei's heart was heavy, but she held immeasurable patience. She waited, always waited. Until one day, Lin Ming slowly opened his eyes. Shen Mei's heart skipped a beat and her complexion changed. It was clear just how unsteady her soul was at this time. She watched as Lin Ming slowly stood up. The earth and weeds rolled down from his body. At this moment, it was like Lin Ming was crawling out from a grave. Lin Ming walked forwards. It was unknown where he wanted to go. Shang Mei quietly followed behind. She followed him as he crossed mountains, passed rivers, walked through seas, and climbed a mountain that pierced into the skies like a sword. On the mountain's summit, Shang Mei saw two swordsmen that seemed as if they had just started on the road of martial arts. They were holding a martial meeting on the summit of this sword mountain. These are people that Lin Ming knew from the mortal world. Shang Mei looked at Lin Ming and could see this from his eyes. She watched as the two swordsmen engaged in a fierce contest in the air. She also saw Lin Ming drinking wine with the two after this martial arts meeting, and freely speaking with them. In Shang Mei's eyes, these two swordsmen were as faint as particles of dust. If it weren't for Lin Ming, she wouldn't have been interested in half a word they said. But as she did listen to them, what she heard left her astonished. The words that the two swordsmen spoke contained an inexplicable truth. In particular, what the blue-clothed swordsman said. His words about climbing towards the peak of martial arts seemed to touch her own heart. In this world there are endless mountain peaks. But there must be a single mountain that is the highest. The higher a mountain peak, the more difficult it is for me. And to me, the most terrifying, the most horrifying this is that I simply don't know where this mountain is. I will never stop searching. I know that my vision is limited and I might never be able to find it, but I will climb up as I did before, unendingly. I do not need to truly reach the highest peak in this world, but as I climb, I will be more than happy to simply see that peak above me. This is because when I climb to a new peak, my vision will expand further and I will be able to see where a higher peak lies. And when I climb up that new peak, I will find yet another higher one, and I will keep repeating this. The words of this blue-clothed swordsman echoed in Shang Mei's ears for a long time. Even her fighting spirit seemed to inexplicably stir a little from these words. This fighting spirit was also suitable to her. As for later when they spoke of life and wine, they left even greater waves in Shang Mei's heart. To savor the mellowness and spiciness of life, when the thoughts were truly muddled, perhaps that was when one could truly understand the mysteries. The drunken blue-clothed swordsman's words left Shang Mei startled. It wasn't that the words he spoke contained some profound concept, but it was the appearance of words that should have never appeared in Shang Mei's imagination that left her heart racing. She had an inexplicable feeling. That was that everything she saw in this dream might not be an illusion, but what Lin Ming truly experienced in the past. The various names of places, the description of Lin Ming's life, everything that these two swordsmen spoke of were full of vivid detail and life. There were even concepts that she had never felt before. The feelings of a martial artist were not like words of mortals that could be easily written on paper. Rather, they were things that they truly experienced, a sum of their adventures and philosophy on life. It could be said that these feelings were their road of martial arts. These two blue-clothed swordsmen's road of martial arts was thickly colored in the paint of mortals. But in Xiang Mei's mind, it was impossible for her to have such strange comprehensions. Moreover, these feelings were clearly related to wine, but Xiang Mei herself didn't drink wine, so how could she possibly come up with concepts of life and wine in this dream? Could it be that what she saw before her wasn't conjured from her imagination, but what Lin Ming truly experienced in the past? Thinking of this, Xiang Mei's heart shook. Chapter 2152, Unyielding. Why would Lin Ming's memories appear in her dream? Or, how could the demon god's tomb have Lin Ming's memories? Thinking of this, Xiang Mei was left confused. She couldn't understand why. But all she could do now was quietly look on at Lin Ming's life. Her heart trembled all the while. She felt anticipation because she wanted to know of Lin Ming's life. But what she felt more was fear that Lin Ming would die alone. After she watched Lin Ming awaken, he bid farewell to the swordsman and left that sword mountain. She saw Lin Ming head up north, his body worsening with every day. His cultivation fell at a dreadful speed, he had already become crippled. Each day, each night, Xiang Mei would follow Lin Ming. Although his back was straight, it was actually filled with infinite desolateness and sorrow. She felt as if her heart was being shorn apart by a saber. In the past, when she left Lin Ming, she thought that he would face a bitter future. But as she truly experienced all of this following behind him, that feeling was completely different. She was almost completely immersed, feeling for herself the mood of someone who had once stood at the peak of the 33 heavens, a peerless genius who had saved humanity, but who had then been knocked off into the dust by a single move. Now, he only had several dozen years of life remaining. Even though Lin Ming's will was firm and steady, he still couldn't resist such an attack. Xiang Mei followed Lin Ming to Green Mulberry City. She saw street vendors, fortune-tellers, mortal martial arts masters, beggars, scholarly students, woodcutter, all sorts of mortals that she had never seen before. Then, she saw a friendly aunt who gave Lin Ming sesame cake. As Lin Ming savored this sesame cake that was filled with the flavor of mortality, without knowing it, Xiang Mei's gaze had turned hazy. She couldn't imagine how, when humanity was already close to despair, just how much Lin Ming withstood when he lost everything. Perhaps, this was a fate crueler than allowing the Soul Emperor to freely kill him. In Green Mulberry City, in the areas of his childhood, Lin Ming slowly visited each place. Then Lin Ming continued north. The northern desert was covered in fluttering snow. At some unknown time, Lin Ming's face had turned pale and bloodless, and he shivered all over as he coughed up blood. Time and time again. Xiang Mei knew that what Lin Ming coughed up was his blood essence. Although his divine soul was weak, his mortal body was still incredibly powerful and could regenerate blood. However, it was impossible for such a weak soul to control such a formidable mortal body, it simply couldn't resist the exuberant blood vitality. Thus, his body tried to protect itself by coughing up all this blood. If this continued, then he would slowly die as his blood essence left him. To Xiang Mei, every drop of crimson blood was blinding to the eyes. She saw Lin Ming run into an old friend. Or, perhaps he had used his sense to find this person on his own initiative. This was an old man, a man who had experienced the hardships of life to the fullest, and whose body was covered in hidden wounds. She saw Lin Ming save a little girl. This little girl's eyes were pure and wide. Even in the chaotic age of war, when Lin Ming had become incomparably weak and fallen to the ground, only this little girl dared to give water to him. She saw Lin Ming deal with several mortals. But because his body was wounded, blood continued to flow out. A once incomparably talented individual had now become so thin and weak. She saw Lin Ming bid farewell to these people, finally leaving by himself. His body had fallen to a horrendous state, and he limped with every step. Sometimes, he would even tumble down as he walked. His clothing was ruined, his hair was untamed and his face was dirty, he looked no different from a mortal beggar. He wanted to enter a city, but in that wild age of war, a guard believed him to be a refugee and turned him away. Lin Ming didn't say anything, nor did he do anything to that guard. He quietly drew backwards and left. Beneath the setting sun, his thin and haggard figure became a needle that dug into Xiang Mei's heart. Vaguely, Xiang Mei's surroundings seemed to blur. She remembered the words that Lin Ming had once said to her in the soul world, before the great calamity of humanity had truly erupted. "I remember that when I was a mortal, an old friend of mine warned me not to be stubborn and practice martial arts. She didn't want me to spend the rest of my days disabled on a bed. But my answer was, the path of the martial artist is like a flame. Practicing the martial arts will only cause pain. The dangers are countless and the road is filled with obstacles. Everyone who walks down it will eventually turn to ash, but the true martial artist will be reborn from these ashes. Even if I am only a small and weak moth, I will walk into the flames without hesitation. I will fight my destiny for a 1 in a million chance that I will experience my own samsara and be reborn as a flaming phoenix. And even now, I am no longer a moth. I am not Empyrean divine seal. My road is one I will walk down myself. And the choices I make, I will not regret them in the future. If only life stayed like the first time we met." Suddenly, looking back through the rivers of time, nothing fills the eyes but mist. I must struggle in the dust and chaos. Even if I am only a small wave, I will still bravely move forwards. Xiang Mei was deeply aware just how persistent Lin Ming's heart of martial arts was, just how unyielding it was. In the past she had once urged him to give up all thoughts of saving humanity. At that time, Lin Ming had only been at the Holy Lord realm. No matter how one looked at it, he was completely unworthy of mention compared to the great tide of destruction that would sweep over the world. He wouldn't even be able to cause a stir. Once humanity perished, the small and weak Lin Ming would lose his protection. He would be swept up in the endless storm and likely destroyed. But Lin Ming didn't give up. He arrived by himself in the soul world, searching out an impossible alliance with the Spiritas. Then he fought in the primal god realm. For a ray of hope, he went to the primal god realm to search out a path of salvation. But now, Xiang Mei could only watch the back of such a person as well as the red blood that dripped from him. Just what kind of change was this? Xiang Mei's heart quaked. Without following Lin Ming and experiencing all this for herself, she never realized just how bitter his struggle must have become. So many years have passed, he must have died already. Currently, everything that happened was from over 7,000 years ago. And in any case, looking at Lin Ming's physical state, he wouldn't be able to last much longer. But even so, Xiang Mei continued to follow him to confirm with her own eyes. She saw Lin Ming go into a mountain valley to enter seclusion. Xiang Mei saw with surprise that as Lin Ming's life reached the precipice of despair, he began to disperse his martial arts. His weak soul was unable to withstand the strength of his blood vitality and his cultivation. Thus, he simply chose to drop down his cultivation to a level that his soul force could withstand. Without a doubt, this would rapidly reduce his remaining life, and even make his final years much more painful. But he continued forwards without turning back. As if he wanted to break himself apart and rebuild from scratch, as if he were a butterfly that wanted to break free from its cocoon. How was this possible? Xiang Mei shook her head in disbelief. His soul was so weak and the fires of his life were like a candle in the wind. If he dispersed his cultivation here, then he might simply die where he was. This was the end. Perhaps the phantoms she saw could last a few more years, and this valley was Lin Ming's final tomb. All of this proved that the faint hope she had left within Lin Ming was something she did only to psychologically comfort herself for her own actions. Miracles could appear on Lin Ming's body, yet what she envisioned would occur to Lin Ming was not a miracle, but an impossibility. She watched as Lin Ming dispersed his cultivation. Blue veins stuck out from his forehead and he began to scatter blood essence from his pores. The pain of this could be imagined. Even so, Lin Ming didn't cry out in pain once. His expression remained as firm as iron, without the least bit of pain or distortion. He withstood such pain by himself, because he would not yield. Even if he had been pushed to a dead end. Xiang Mei wasn't cruel enough to watch. She could already foresee the following result. Time passed. Through endless pain, Lin Ming grit his teeth and forced himself through it. 1 year, 2 years. With a completely ruined body, Lin Ming clenched his teeth and continued onwards. A normal martial artist would have died from the pain already. But Lin Ming's will was too formidable. In these 2 years, the blood essence that overflowed from his body had already dyed the entire cave red. One could see the coagulated blood on the rocks. Xiang Mei didn't know how many times she saw Lin Ming fall onto the floor in dry heaves, how many times his forehead dripped with beads of blood, how many times he broke through his lips by biting them, how deep his toes and fingers dug into the rocky soil as it mixed with his blood. However, he still didn't give up. The unyielding will in his bones pushed him to give this his all. Xiang Mei gently sighed, her eyes already becoming blurry. Chapter 2153, Child. Day after day, year after year. Lin Ming continued his struggle in the cave, forcefully persisting for 10 years. 10 years later, Lin Ming already resembled an old man in his final years. Although his back had been lonely, it had still be relaxed and straight. But now his back was bent over with age. His face was full of deep wrinkles and his eyes had become grim and dirty. Xiang Mei could feel that Lin Ming would die soon. The footsteps of the god of death rapidly approached. As someone who understood the death laws, how could she not feel the death energy emitting from within Lin Ming's body? This was the end. Xiang Mei closed her eyes, no longer able to endure watching on. Even so, her sense continued to lock onto Lin Ming's everything. She watched as Lin Ming's eye turned from pure brilliance to dirtiness, and then from dirtiness to nothingness. Afterwards, his body no longer moved and his atrophied muscles became completely paralyzed. His beating heart becoming weaker with each beat, and his tiny wisps of soul fire slowly dissipating into the world. Lin Ming had finally, truly, died. In that moment, Xiang Mei realized that Lin Ming's spiritual sea had lost all color. He still maintained his cross-legged sitting posture. In the final moments of his life, under extreme pain and duress, he still didn't give up rushing towards that one slim ray of hope that never existed to begin with. For a genius that once shook the heavens and earth, this was the final result. In a lower world, in a barren mountain cave that had no name, he had died alone. No one knew just what sort of great legend was buried beneath this small mountain. At this time, Xiang Mei's face was wet with tears. Although she knew that Lin Ming had died, she still quietly waited here. She continued to wait, feeling the entire time that a piece of her heart was being dug out. She was determined to remember this place in her dream. In the future she would go back to the Skyspill continent, find this barren mountain hill and dig out Lin Ming's bones to bury in her own inner world. Year after year, Xiang Mei waited in this cave. She no longer knew how long she waited here. She thought she had waited long enough, it was time to return. But as she thought of returning, she was left stunned. She wanted to return, but return to where? She was lost, as if the part of her heart that had been dug out was part of her soul. And with this part of her soul missing, she suddenly forgot the road back. Or, perhaps there was no road to begin with. In this great world, whether it was the 33 heavens or dark abyss, there was nowhere that was family to her. What was family? Safety? Warmth? Affection? In this world, was there some place that could make her feel safe? Feel warmth? Feel affection? She faced pressure at all times. She faced people who harbored dark and sinister intentions towards her, faced factions that fought each other and mistrusted each other. She simply didn't have a family. There was no place where she could relax. In fact, there wasn't even a place that could make her feel at ease as she could by lying in this dark cave, beside this corpse. Thinking of this, Xiang Mei felt forlorn. She no longer wished to leave. She was like a wild lone ghost, wandering about by herself, no longer remembering why she was here. All that remained in her memories was to stand guard in this place. She seemed to have lost something important. But as for what it was, she couldn't think of it. She didn't know how much time passed. It seemed endless, as if there were no end in sight. But at some casual moment, she suddenly saw an unbelievably faint glow light up over Lin Ming's corpse. That dim light seemed to twinkle from the corner of a cube. And on that cube, all sorts of ancient and mystical runes flashed. And that dim light itself possessed an indescribably mysterious aura. Like this, it wafted in between Xiang Mei's eyebrows. In that moment, in the depths of her soul, Xiang Mei shivered. She seemed to awaken from a nightmare. As her body shook, the dreamland all around her shattered like glass. Light flashed. Inexhaustible tattered thoughts flew around her. In a flash, Xiang Mei returned to a vast dark hall. She dripped with a cold sweat as she gathered her scattered wits, recovering from the shock. She knew that she had nearly lost herself in that dream and had almost been unable to disentangle herself from it. That was a heart demon. Everything she saw just now had become an incomparably strong obsession because of her heart demons, and what she saw tore at her soul again and again. The marks that Lin Ming left in her memories were far too deep. Xiang Mei's life was filled with gray. What she faced was a life without hope. And at this time, no one was able to become a pillar that supported Xiang Mei, because no matter who it was, they would eventually be overtaken by her and cast away in the dust. In truth, she was incomparably lonely. She needed someone that could accompany her. But the only person who could accompany her had been personally destroyed by her. The impact of such a heart demon could be imagined. When a martial artist faced a heart demon, the most terrifying thought was that their dream world would be even better than reality, and they would no longer wish to awaken from that dream. Once that happened, they were destined to be lost forever. Even though Xiang Mei had passed through 9 reincarnations and her divine soul was incomparably powerful, she still couldn't resist such a heart demon and in the end had nearly lost herself in that cave. As she recalled the dream that seemed to have gone on for dozens of years, Xiang Mei discovered she could clearly remember everything about Lin Ming's life. She remembered Lin Ming's hardship, downfall, resistance, everything was a vivid recollection that still twisted at her heart like a knife. But in the final moments of that dream, there had been some unknown black sparkle of light that had allowed her to escape the clutches of her heart demons. As for what the light had been, she had no idea. She didn't even know if that spark of light had truly existed or not. Had it only been an illusion? Could it be an illusion formed by her heart demons? Just what was it? Xiang Mei felt that the spark of light was extremely familiar. She should have been able to think about what it was, yet as she tried, it became even blurrier in her mind. But at this time, as she was deep in thought, Xiang Mei's heart chilled. She could feel a terrifying aura approach. She suddenly looked up. She could see a pale white youth with filthy eyes, whose body gushed over with rich death energy. This youth slowly emerged from the darkness to stand before her. This old youth that resembled a corpse was the Soul Emperor. Xiang Mei's heart shrank. Seeing the Soul Emperor, normally she wouldn't been surprised. But why would the Soul Emperor appear in this scene? Was this a dream? Or reality? She felt her memories were in chaos. Though she had just recently regained consciousness from that dream, she seemed to have forgotten something important, but she couldn't recall what it was. You? Xiang Mei opened her mouth to speak. But before she could finish speaking, the Soul Emperor looked at Xiang Mei's belly and diabolically grinned. In that moment, Xiang Mei's entire body turned icy cold. She didn't fear the Soul Emperor to begin with, but as she realized something truly horrifying, she stood up tall, all blood draining out of her face. The Soul Emperor pressed forwards, one step by one step. Xiang Mei paled. She retreated, one step by one step. Beads of sweat fell down from Xiang Mei's forehead. Because at this time, she realized just what might be happening. Finally, the Soul Emperor forced Xiang Mei into a corner. He cruelly smiled, pointing at her belly and saying, "You used the strength of your 9-revolution Red Lotus to seal away the child in your stomach. Are you worried that the growth of that unborn child will take away a part of the totem abyssal strength I left within you, thus alarming me? You sealed away that fetus for 7,000 years, and in addition to the time you spent in time enchantments, over 10,000 years have passed. You truly thought this out well. What do you plan on doing? Surely you aren't naive enough to believe that you will be able to give birth to this child." Xiang Mei grit her teeth, not uttering a word. She quietly traced her spatial ring, already ready to bring out her bone sword. "You want to resist me?" The Soul Emperor looked at Xiang Mei as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. "Everything you have, I gave to you. Your cultivation methods were taught by me, and yet you actually think you can revolt against me. Ha ha ha." The Soul Emperor cackled, and infinite killing intent burst out from him. Then, his palm came crashing down onto Xiang Mei's belly. "No!" Xiang Mei roared out loud. In this moment, she was like a mother tiger enraged at the injury of her cub, desperately attacking the Soul Emperor. The black light of a bone sword leapt into Xiang Mei's palm. Then, she turned towards the Soul Emperor and brought it mercilessly slashing down. However, facing this sword, the Soul Emperor simply reached out 2 fingers and easily caught the blade. Chapter 2154, Awakened Dream. This sword is quite good. The rate of your rising strength is such a pleasant surprise. The Soul Emperor laughed. At the same time, a horrifying force field spread out from him. It covered Xiang Mei's entire body, instantly freezing her so that she couldn't move an inch. As for the Soul Emperor's palm, after pausing for a moment, it continued to crash down on Xiang Mei's belly with unstoppable momentum. Roiling death energy swelled up beneath the Soul Emperor's palm, causing the blood in Xiang Mei's body to freeze over. She struggled to break free from the force field, however. Pang! A dull sound echoed out, as if something had been broken. Xiang Mei spat out a mouthful of blood as she tumbled backwards like a butterfly with torn wings. In that moment, what was strange was that she didn't feel pain in her body. Rather, she felt as if in her life she had lost something of extreme importance, something that left her despondent and utterly discouraged. Over? It was all over. This was originally nothing but an impossible dream to begin with. Xiang Mei could feel her consciousness blur. As for the pain in her belly, it couldn't compare to even the tiniest percentage of the pain that racked her heart. She felt as if her entire life was laughable. She was well aware that from start to finish, she was only a tool. She wanted to leave behind something in the senseless life she lived. She had once placed hopes in Lin Ming, but Lin Ming had actually been personally destroyed by her. She thought that there would never be color again in her life. But, when she left the Skyspill continent, departed the 33 heavens and arrived at the Dark Abyss, she suddenly discovered that she was pregnant. This was a matter that left Xiang Mei's heart completely bewildered. Her state of mind was incomparably complicated. She never thought that she would experience such a day. She never imagined that after sealing away her heart, dooming herself to a life of loneliness and sorrow, vowing to never contaminate herself with useless feelings and emotions, there would actually be a day when she was a prospective mother. Lin Ming and Xiang Mei were different races to begin with, so the chances of her becoming pregnant after sex was incredibly low. However, she had underestimated the strength of Lin Ming's bloodline. The appearance of this child left Xiang Mei at a loss for what to do. The father of this child had been personally destroyed by its mother. Moreover, because of a variety of reasons, there was no way she could somehow allow this child a chance to survive. But at this time, the Soul Emperor just happened to go into seclusion to refine the eternal soul. Xiang Mei could temporarily guarantee this child's safety. However, she knew that once this child was truly born, it would inevitably stir up the mark and energy that the Soul Emperor had left in her spiritual sea. then the Soul Emperor would surely know what was happening. Although he might not be able to immediately catch up to her because he was in seclusion, once he emerged she would surely have to withstand his rage. And this child would undoubtedly die. Xiang Mei once thought she could let this child live the life of a thorough mortal. In the dark abyss, she could open up a beautiful world like one from the 33 heavens. She could buy up numerous ancient race slaves, allowing them to become residents in this world and to thrive and live on. Then, she could allow her child to be born. She could accompany her child, gazing at the clouds, watching flowers bloom and fade. She could satisfy all her child's desires and live a life of good fortune and happiness. Watching her child from birth, she could watch her child slowly grow, learn to walk, marry someone, age, and eventually pass on in their sleep. She could only give this child of hers a short and brief life, a full and complete life, before the Soul Emperor left seclusion. She could have her child believe themselves immortal, living in their own idealistic dreamland. However, when Xiang Mei decided to do this, she hesitated once more. She couldn't imagine what would happen once she poured all of her love and joy into this child, and what would be left of her after her child died. To live on through memories? A small bug that lived amongst the withered leaves and branches would never know the true beauty and greatness of the world. If one wished to see all the world had to offer, they had to step towards the peak of martial artists. But because there were too many fetters, it was impossible to strengthen one's heart. However, if one were to abandon all their fetters, what would be left over of life? In these days, Xiang Mei was lost in a helpless daze. She watched the child grow in her belly with every passing day, and she knew she couldn't sit back and allow this to continue. Thus, she sealed away the growth of that child. She found it hard to imagine her future, nor did she want to so easily arrange the future fate of her child. But if this continued and the Soul Emperor were to leave seclusion, everything would be doomed to tragedy. Xiang Mei felt as if she had rushed into a dead end. Would she also have to lose the only sustenance of her life? Mama, why are you worried? As Xiang Mei was lost in confusion, a supple and weak child's voice echoed in her ears. This voice seemed to touch the softest parts of Xiang Mei's heart. Xiang Mei trembled. She lowered her head and stared at her belly, her mind violently shaking like turbulent waves. She could feel faint life fluctuations coming from her stomach. This was her child, her flesh and blood. In an instant, all the faith and will she had built up over the tens of thousands of years of her life instantly collapsed upon hearing the weak and tender voice of this child. Mama! I am so hot, the child's voice blurred, seeming as if it were in extreme pain. There is a fire burning me, I can't open my eyes. Fire? Where did fire come from? Xiang Mei was left panic-stricken. She probed her belly with her divine sense, and what she saw left her drowning in a nigh nether abyss. There was a dark and ominous strength in her belly, like abyssal flames that burned away all. This strength wrapped around her child, wanting to melt away this tiny life. This was the strength that the Soul Emperor had left in that palm just now. No! Xiang Mei felt as if someone were cutting open her heart with an axe. She placed her hands on her belly, using the power of her cold ice to neutralize the Soul Emperor's evil strength and protect her child. However, when Xiang Mei's cold ice strength touched those dreadful abyssal flames, it was like snowflakes dropped in boiling water, instantly melting away. The Soul Emperor's strength was far too powerful. With her strength it was impossible to shake him. The disparity was too great. Mama, I think I will die, it hurts so much. No, my child, Mama will save you. You must persist, you must fight on. Listening to the continually weakening child's voice, Xiang Mei's heart was already crushed to pieces. She hated herself for being weak. What a ridiculous so-called proud daughter of heaven, what a pathetic peak of martial arts, she couldn't even protect her own child. Mama! I can't last much longer. I have been inside Mama for so long that I can't remember, but I actually want to be born. I want to see Mama. My Mama surely must be beautiful. That blurry child's voice stopped here, like a dream that was suddenly shattered. Xiang Mei's hands trembled and her soul shivered, but there was no longer the tiniest sound coming from her belly, no longer the weakest life fluctuations. Everything seemed as if it never existed to begin with. No, no, no. Xiang Mei grasped her belly with all her strength. Her nails pierced through her smooth flesh and dripped with blood. Her eyes turned blood red and her hair scattered out, like a demon of the night. Her child had died. In her life, she no longer had her final sustenance. Xiang Mei looked up. From her eyes, 2 trails of blood-red tears flowed out. Soul Emperor. She wished to eat his raw meat, drink his fresh blood. In that moment, Xiang Mei burnt all the strength of her soul. Like an erupting volcano, it broke into her spiritual sea, forming a terrifying storm. Kacha! 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 With the sound of something breaking apart, in Xiang Mei's mind, she burned away at everything with the horrifying storm formed by her soul. She constantly attacked a black rune. This black rune formed a net of light that imprisoned this storm. However, a crack suddenly appeared above this net of light. The black rune couldn't persist for much longer. Ka 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 ka. More and more cracking sounds filled the air and the rune became increasingly dim. This storm was unleashed and could no longer be tamed, it became increasingly powerful. Cracks spread throughout the net of light, and then, the strength it locked in suddenly erupted. Pang! With a loud explosive sound, strength crazily swelled outwards. The net of light as well as the black rune were torn to shreds. The black rune was a spirit mark that had been sealed away in Xiang Mei's spiritual sea. But at this moment, it blew apart to pieces. Meanwhile, separated by endless space and time, in a dry and desolate soul sea of torment that seethed with innumerable bones. Above this sea of torment sat a pale youth with snow-white hair. He sat on an island formed from piles of bones, meditating in quiet. He had the appearance of a youth, but his body emitted a death energy that only a corpse should have. This was the 33 Heaven Soul Emperor. After stealing Lin Ming's eternal soul in the Skyspill planet, he had gone into seclusion for nearly 10,000 years. No matter how the waves of the soul sea stirred up, no matter how the bones floated, he was like a stone sculpture that remained unmoved for 10,000 years. But today, his eyes flashed open. He looked somewhere in the void, his filthy eyes flashing with profound astonishment. How is this possible? The old youth stood up. His snow-white hair fell down his back like a waterfall, making him look like a ghost. His expression that was like a clear mirror that never saw any violent fluctuations of emotions for hundreds of millions of years, was now actually filled with amazement and disbelief. Chapter 2155, Regaining Consciousness. She actually broke through my spirit mark? With her strength this should be impossible. The truth was that not to mention Xiang Mei, but even in the entire 33 heavens and dark abyss combined, there wasn't anyone capable of undoing the spirit mark left behind by the Soul Emperor. This was because this spirit mark had taken deep root within Xiang Mei's spiritual sea. Even if there was someone who possessed a soul force capable of rivaling the Soul Emperor's, if one tried to forcefully undo the spirit mark, then it would cause Xiang Mei's spiritual sea to collapse. Thus, this spirit mark could only be broken through by Xiang Mei herself. The Soul Emperor reached out a bloodless white hand, the points of his fingers rapidly touching as he quickly deduced just what occurred. He wanted to figure out what this new turn of events was. But bizarrely, he discovered that as he tried to investigate this matter, his efforts were hampered by layers of fog that blocked his sight so that he couldn't clearly see what was occurring. What is happening? The Soul Emperor frowned. He did not like having anything surpass his control. He narrowed his eyes and looked deep in the sea of misery and the endless skeletons that floated above it. Eventually, he sat back down and his mind returned to serenity once more. Although the spirit mark he left in Xiang Mei's spiritual sea had shattered, as long as he left seclusion, then none of this would be a problem. Currently, completely refining the eternal soul was the vital task at hand. As for Xiang Mei, it was impossible for her to use this brief period of time to raise her strength to a level where she could escape his reach. At this time, in the demon god's tomb, Xiang Mei's soul form had turned pale white without the least bit of blood. When she burnt her soul just now, she had erupted with an unimaginable strength that had surpassed her present cultivation by several levels. What should have been impossible had actually happened. In the mortal world, during earthquakes, when a mother saw their child being pressed beneath rubble, the delicate woman could actually erupt with a strength far surpassing that of an adult male, pushing apart stones that were several hundred genes to rescue their child. What Xiang Mei just did was also the same. This was a mother's strength. However, because she overdrew on her soul, it left her extremely weakened afterwards. Moreover, because Xiang Mei was immersed in her heart demons, with her weakened soul it would be impossible for her to resist the invasion of these heart demons. She had already lost consciousness. At this time, in the bottom of the Killing Lake, in a deep underground cavern, a towering abyssal was crouched near a corpse. This abyssal stretched out a finger to pierce into the arm of this corpse and slowly absorb the power of demon gods. The impact of the heart demons just now had been terrifying in intensity. Because Lin Ming possessed the magic cube, he hadn't been affected the least. He had also intentionally allowed himself to experience the attacks of the heart demons. Otherwise, he definitely would have been able to maintain his consciousness from beginning to the end. Then, Lin Ming continued to be swept down by the vortex of the Killing Lake. After dropping for an unknown period of time, he was finally dropped into this deep underground cavern. In this underground cavern there was not only him, but several other abyssals that had lost consciousness. Lin Ming investigated them and discovered that these abyssals had already died. During the test of the heart demons, the souls of these abyssals weren't strong enough to withstand it. In the end, their souls exploded to pieces and their spiritual seas had collapsed. Their blood vitality also slowly faded away. Before long, they would become nourishment for this strange world. Seeing this scene, Lin Ming sighed with emotion. Each of these abyssals was an overbearing tyrant of their own land. Yet in the demon god's tomb, they were no different from cannon fodder. It could only be said that the rank of this demon god's tomb was too terrifying. Through the 33 heavens and the dark abyss, in all the universes combined, this was the highest rank, and the most terrifying mystic realm to exist. Lin Ming continued his search. He wanted to see if these abyssals had any valuable treasures they left behind, and while at it he could also use famine-swallowing laws to absorb the bits of the power of demon gods still in these abyssals' bodies before it faded away. But at this time, another unconscious body fell into the cavern. Pang! The sound of this body landing was much lighter. It couldn't be compared to the giant abyssal demons that crashed into the ground. Lin Ming's thoughts stirred. He stretched out his sense to search out the source of that sound. If his luck was good, he could find this abyssal just as they died, and then he could absorb even more of the power of demon gods from them. However, when Lin Ming found that body with his sense, he actually froze. The one who just fell was not anyone else but a black-clothed woman, Soul Empress Xiang Mei. Xiang Mei, did she withstand the impact of the heart demons? Lin Ming's mind tightened. After probing with his sense, he discovered that Xiang Mei still had a weak breath and heartbeat. However, she was deathly pale and her lips were blue. Her fires of life were weak, and it was clear that she had overdrawn herself in the heart demon test just now. Moreover, she was still immersed in her heart demons and hadn't awoken. This left Lin Ming surprised. The impact of heart demons had indeed been terrifying, but he had easily passed it using the magic cube. But even if he didn't use the magic cube, Lin Ming believed that with his eternal soul he could pay a certain price to persist through the heart demons. In Lin Ming's eyes, after reaching perfection of 9 reincarnations, Xiang Mei's divine soul was undoubtedly formidable. Although she couldn't pass this test as easily as he did, she should still have been able to do so without losing consciousness. Lin Ming swept out his sense. The already unconsciousness Xiang Mei could not resist Lin Ming's sense. Lin Ming's sense entered into Xiang Mei's spiritual sea without any hindrance. As Lin Ming saw the scene in Shang Mei's spiritual sea, he held his breath. He had guessed that Shang Mei had overdrawn her divine soul, but he never imagined she had overdrawn herself to this extent. Her entire spiritual sea had dried up by over half. And in the skies above her spiritual sea, deep dark cloud gathered. In these dark clouds, demons and ghosts rapidly danced and howled. These were Shang Mei's heart demons. The degree of their formidability far surpassed Lin Ming's own heart demons. Shang Mei actually has such terrifying heart demons. Every heart demon is an obsession and fear of Shang Mei's heart. No wonder she couldn't withstand this even with her divine soul of 9 reincarnations. Lin Ming shook his head. With a nearly exhausted spiritual sea and such powerful heart demons, it was already a miracle that Shang Mei could maintain the fires of her life without dying like the other abyssals. Lin Ming fell into thought. If he didn't quickly rescue her, then she would likely fall into a permanent sleep and no longer awaken. And even if she did awaken, her spiritual sea would be forever wounded. But if he rescued her, he wouldn't know if she would be an enemy or friend in the future. Between him and the Soul Emperor there would eventually be a battle. And when that time arrived, would Shang Mei side with the Soul Emperor? Perhaps the Soul Emperor had some method to restrain and control Shang Mei. At that time, if he wanted to fight the Soul Emperor, he might need to pass the test of Shang Mei first. If so, then he was only looking for bitter fruit to eat on his own. But as he watched Shang Mei's divine soul gradually weaken, Lin Ming let out a gentle breath and opened the Grand Mist Force Field. After blocking out his surroundings, he lifted his right hand and the magic cube appeared in his palm. Shang Mei could be considered as having saved his life. Otherwise, 7,000 years ago, whether it was Soaring Feather God King or the Soul Emperor, either one could have easily taken his life. And no matter what, he should save Shang Mei first. Even if he saved her, she would surely be weak and definitely not a match for him. After saving her, could he somehow obtain more secrets of the Soul Emperor? But doing so would likely completely expose his identity. If the Soul Emperor had left behind some sort of mark or contingency in Shang Mei, then if he were to capture Shang Mei, there was a likelihood that his confrontation with the Soul Emperor would be shifted to an earlier time. The present situation could be said to be filled with complicated intricacies. At this time, a red-clothed little girl emerged from the magic cube. She curiously looked at the slumbering Shang Mei and said, "Brother Lin, isn't this the big sister from the Akashic Dream universe?" It's her," Lin Ming lightly said. He gently patted the magic cube with one hand and some of the runes atop it began to sparkle. A dim light shot into the point between Shang Mei's eyebrows and then covered the skies above her spiritual sea. The layers of dark clouds that were her heart demons began to melt away like snow in the sun beneath this dim light. Many heart demons cried out in pain and roared in misery. They wanted to plunge into Shang Mei's spiritual sea to hide, but in the end they were swept into the dim light and turned to ashes. After eliminating all the heart demons, Lin Ming's thoughts stirred and he poured a bit of his divine soul strength into Shang Mei's spiritual sea. Like this, as if she had slept for an untold number of years and awaited this moment, Shang Mei slowly and quietly opened her eyes. Chapter 2156, Whose Child Is It? The dim and blurry surroundings began to gradually clear. What Shang Mei entered was a dark gray underground cavern. After experiencing ever-changing characters and unpredictable environments, Shang Mei couldn't distinguish whether what lay before her was an illusion or reality. I am. In an instant, Shang Mei instantly thought of something that left her dripping with a cold sweat. My child. Shang Mei cried out in alarm and grasped her belly. She originally drowned in despair, but what left her shocked was that after touching her stomach, she could clearly feel a wisp of an extremely weak life fluctuation that was being sealed away. This fluctuation was like a sprouting seed buried deep underground. Although it was young and fragile, it still continued to furiously grow. And on this sprout, there was a light seal that acted as a big stone, forcibly suppressing its growth. After experiencing all sorts of dreams, she felt the life fluctuations of her child once more, as well as that icy cold seal above that life fluctuation. Immediately, Xiangmei quivered and tears streamed down from her eyes. My child. It was still alive. Xiangmei grabbed her belly as she heaved in great sobbing breaths. All of her emotions seemed to burst out like a collapsing dam, exploding in that moment. These emotions had been constrained for tens of thousands of years. For these tens of thousands of years she had been arrogant and lofty, an icy goddess untainted by the sins of mortals. But in this moment, she was only a helpless woman that glowed with motherhood. She could lose everything, or it could be said that she never had anything to begin with. But she could not lose her life's only sustenance. For this, she could pay any price. My child, Mama will no longer seal you away, I won't. Xiangmei muttered. These words came from the depths of her heart. As if something were transforming within her, or perhaps because she had overdrawn herself to break through the Soul Emperor's seal, her incomparably weak soul began to shine with all the colors of a rainbow. The light was extremely weak. Compared to the light of Xiangmei's soul when she had been at her peak, this light couldn't be considered much at all. But this light actually contained an unspeakably deep concept, fearless and covered in thorns. Although Xiangmei had arrived at the limits of weakness, in these last tens of thousands of years her heart of martial arts had never been as firm as it was today. But in that moment, the teary-eyed Xiangmei's heart turned icy cold. When she awoke just now, because her emotions had been too volatile and her body had been too weak, she hadn't noticed her surroundings at all. But now she could clearly feel someone behind her. Xiangmei turned around, her eyes shards of ice. Behind her was a towering large abyssal that frowned as he stared at her. His eyes were colored with doubt and he had a strange expression as he stared at her belly. You! Xiangmei never thought that her actions just now would have been seen by this abyssal. This left her ashamed and enraged. Her pregnancy was her greatest secret. If it were known by the Soul Emperor, the consequences would be inconceivable. Normally, if abyssals were to discover this matter, Xiangmei would surely kill them off to eliminate any possible clues. But now she was incomparably weak, and this abyssal standing before her was. It's you? Xiangmei was shocked. This abyssal, wasn't it the one she was to be married to? Xiangmei originally didn't hold any malice or animosity towards this ninth elder from the ancient Yan sect, but, after meeting again in such a manner. Xiangmei took a deep breath. This current situation had taken a turn for the worst. She had always kept a tight lock on the secret of her pregnancy, taking any precaution necessary. Because countless abyssals wished to marry her, she had been annoyed and finally became tired of this matter, and had directly proposed that any abyssal that could defeat her at the same boundary would be considered for marriage. This proposal deterred all her pursuers. Every time Xiangmei accepted a challenge, she would ruthlessly beat that challenger into the ground, crippling them for a year or two to serve as an example for all others. The effects of her decision were amazing. No one had bothered her for several hundred years, but who imagined that such a monstrous freak would suddenly appear out of nowhere? After some hardship she had negotiated certain conditions with this monstrous freak, and even had to offer up the pages of death of the Holy Scripture. This was also that they agreed to be husband and wife in name only, neither party interfering with the other's business. But after all that had been resolved, this abyssal actually found out about her pregnancy. Not to mention whether or not he would divulge this news, there was already trouble based on their relationship alone. There was no man willing to be made a cuckold, no man that was willing to inexplicably become the father to another man's child. In particular, this other party was a higher abyssal with outstanding talent, whose heart was higher than the heavens. If the usually rough and savage abyssals were to come across this sort of matter, they would surely try to refine the fetus or even violently stamp it out. Even if he didn't descend into a murderous frenzy, he might go to the high-level figures of Deep King Road in his rage. If that occurred, the consequences would be unimaginable. Xiangmei subconsciously traced her spatial ring, her palms already wet with sweat. She was far too weak right now. Disregarding the fact that she hadn't been able to defeat Lin Ming in her peak state, right now she couldn't even contend with a peak Empyrean. Once he attacked, she would surely be ruthlessly ravaged. If this Abyssal were to lose his mind from rage, even killing her child and raping her might be a possibility. But facing Xiang Mei's wariness and killing intent, Lin Ming seemed to not think anything of it at all. He continued to look at her belly with a strange expression on his face, something that bordered on thoughtfulness. His first reaction was that this child was definitely not his own. After 7,000 years, even if he believed he had left behind a child, they should have long since been born. But as he heard Xiang Mei mention words like seal, it seemed that the growth of this child had been sealed away. If so, then this was a truly intriguing matter. Moreover, Lin Ming probed with his sense and truly did faintly feel a seal in Xiang Mei's belly. As for that child's weak life fluctuations, they had been isolated by that seal and even he hadn't been able to sense them. Could this child be his own? Lin Ming wouldn't be overly sentimental or engrossed in his own affections. After all, 7,000 years had passed, and who knew if Xiang Mei had any changes in her romantic life? Whose child is that in your belly? Lin Ming couldn't help but ask, ignoring Xiang Mei's vigilance. What do you care about such things? In any case, it has nothing to do with you. Xiang Mei icily responded. Lin Ming's question about the child's father left her on guard. Normally in such a situation, a man would ask this question after a bout of rage and then seek out the father to settle the score. Although the child's father was already dead, there was still the father's family, friends, homeland. In the future the Dark Abyss would invade the 33 heavens. She couldn't say for sure that this Abyssal wouldn't find a chance to take revenge. Lin Ming awkwardly traced his nose. He also knew that it was a bit ridiculous to ask such a question. This sort of matter was a stain on Deep King Road's holy demoness, so how could she tell him? If you have any conditions, you may speak them. Xiang Mei's chest heaved. She could see that Lin Ming hadn't lost his reasoning and desperately attacked her, thus she put on an expression and tone of defeat. Currently, she simply wasn't Lin Ming's match and she had no qualifications to resist him. Conditions? Lin Ming rubbed his chin, his gaze still pinned on her belly. He wanted to pierce through that seal and catch the aura of that child's life fluctuations. As long as he could sense this aura, he could judge whether or not this was his child. However, in order to cover up her pregnancy, Xiang Mei had completely sealed the aura of her child's life into her belly so that none of it leaked out. If Lin Ming wanted to forcefully break through this seal, he could do that, but he feared his actions would injure the child. Yes. Any conditions you want. Besides my body and my child's life, you can raise any condition you desire. If you desire my cultivation methods, I can also offer them to you. You should know that the rank of my cultivation methods surpasses the true divinity level, and I also have 2 sets of pages. I originally only gave you the pages of death and not the pages of life, but if you want I can give them both to you completely. Xiang Mei was already prepared to pay a deep price. After all, without even the ability to flee, she had no power to bargain. Chapter 2157, Demon God Relief. Pages of Life? I can't say I'm much interested in that. Lin Ming looked at Xiang Mei with surprise. He never imagined Xiang Mei would be so anxious about her child. This seemed to deviate from Lin Ming's previous perceptions of Xiang Mei. In Lin Ming's mind, the Xiang Mei he knew could become emotional at times, but she still had her own ambitions. And to achieve these ambitions she could sacrifice some things. But today, because of her child, Xiang Mei had lost her composure completely. Not only was Lin Ming surprised, but his impression of her changed. Then what do you want? Xiang Mei warily looked at Lin Ming, paying close attention to every change in his expression. Right now, she didn't detect any anger from him. Could this Abyssal be so easy to speak with? I want you to undo that seal and let me investigate the child's aura. Lin Ming calmly said as he continued looking at Xiang Mei's belly. If it were his child then he could surely recognize it upon sensing its aura. Moreover, he would absolutely take responsibility for the child. But if it weren't his child? Thinking of this, Lin Ming sighed inwardly. If this child wasn't his, then it was what it was. In any case, the degrees to which they were enemies would only increase. This absurd would also end here. She had rescued him and he had rescued her, all debts had been paid and everyone was even. In the future, when they met, they would be enemies, foes that fought on the precipice of life and death. You want to investigate the child's aura? Shang Mei never imagined Lin Ming would put forth such conditions. She would have to unseal her child sooner or later, but to do so in the demon god's tomb would bring about a great deal of trouble. This was because in the demon god's tomb, there was also Deep Child. Once he discovered him, this was equal to everything being known by the Soul Emperor. Shang Mei hesitated for a moment. But as she did, a loud explosive sound erupted, as if something were collapsing. Lin Ming and Shang Mei felt their hearts turn cold. They immediately probed with their senses. However, because Shang Mei was in a weakened state, she felt as if something were blocking out her sense and she couldn't distinguish just what was occurring. But at this time, Lin Ming had already discerned the source of the noise. He frowned, a cold light flashing in his eyes. Ha ha ha. I thought that everyone had died, but I never thought 2 others would live. A wild and raucous sound echoed out. It was the great Flood Crown Prince. In this moment, Shang Mei's heart tightened. The peak middle true divinity Great Flood Crown Prince. This was bad. And it was clear that he had already discovered them. What should she do? Shang Mei's heart raced. The current situation was far too grim. Even if she were at her peak, she still wouldn't be able to contend with the Great Flood Crown Prince. But if she were to join forces with Lin Ming, they could at least have the Great Flood Crown Prince dread them a little. But currently, there was only Lin Ming left. He had no reason to protect her to begin with, and even if he was willing to, he wasn't a match for the Great Flood Crown Prince. At this time, Lin Ming didn't utter a word. He lifted his foot and started walking through the cavern. The direction he went in was towards the area the Great Flood Crown Prince's laughter came from. You? Shang Mei was stunned. In truth, the most natural and rational decision Lin Ming should have made now was to leave her behind and run away on his own. If so, then the Great Flood Crown Prince might not be able to catch up to him. After all, Lin Ming wasn't a weakling and the environment and terrain of this underground cavern was too complex and confusing. No one knew what would appear here, and the Great Flood Crown Prince might lose track of Lin Ming. Of course, her own fate would be the most tragic and miserable of all. Seeing Lin Ming's towering back silently move forwards through the dark cavern, Shang Mei followed behind with all her bewildered emotions in tow. She didn't ask Lin Ming why he did what he did, she only quietly followed behind. As they walked forwards, Shang Mei saw several corpses. These corpses were abyssals that had been sucked down into the lake with them. But presently, their life forces had been strangled. It was clear they had died to their heart demons. This scene caused a chill to creep down Shang Mei's back. The heart demon attack of the killing lake was far too terrifying. She had fallen to heart demons twice and had been unable to tear herself away. The first time was when she had witnessed Lin Ming's death. She had fallen into despondent sorrow and no longer wished to leave the cave where Lin Ming had passed. The second time was when the child in her stomach had been killed by the Soul Emperor. In that moment she had lost her spirit and would rather have died than lived on. If it weren't for that strange dim black light saving her, then she too might be a corpse on the ground. Even if she still had a single breath remaining, it would only have been a matter of time until her spiritual sea collapsed. Thinking of this, Shang Mei was left puzzled. Who had rescued her, and what was that black light? Looking at Lin Ming's back, Shang Mei couldn't help but speculate. This abyssal walking in front of her had passed through the heart demon attack as if nothing had happened to him, as if he had merely been a bystander watching it all. Perhaps his soul had been too formidable, or it could have been that his heart demons were too weak. These were things that Shang Mei didn't care much to find out about. The key question here was that black light. When she woke up, only the ninth elder had been present. Could this black light have been related to him? As Shang Mei was deep in thought, Lin Ming's footsteps started to slow down. Unknowingly, they had wandered into a powerful force field. When Shang Mei released her sense and wasn't able to immediately discover anything, it was also because this force field had blocked her out. Shang Mei looked intently forwards. Then, her heart sank. Not too far away in front of them was an incredibly vast underground space. And at the entrance to this space stood an abyssal wearing purple war armor, his hands crossed against his back and he faced his back towards them. In front of this abyssal was a great cliff. He was leaning over as if he were trying to see something beneath the cliff. Shang Mei swept out her sense. Fatally, she could see that this cliff was 10,000 feet deep, and beneath the cliff were layers upon layers of mist. Hidden within this mist was a giant rock relief. This rock relief was more than 10 miles round and had a three-headed six-armed demon god carved into it. This demon god had a fierce and hideous expression. Its 6 arms held different weapons, and it seemed as if it were the ruler of the universe. Behind this demon god were many higher abyssals. They were soldiers beneath the demon god's command. And in the demon god's mouth was a bronze coffin wrapped in chains. This bronze coffin was 20 feet long and 10 feet high. It was locked tightly with thick chains, and it was unknown just what was hidden within. The terrifying force field that pervaded the air seemed to originate from this demon god relief as well as the bronze coffin. You finally arrived. The Ninth Elder is truly a hero of the times. That powerful heart demon impact just now still wasn't able to affect you in the least. I truly and deeply admire your skills. Moreover, the purple war armored abyssal slowly turned around, revealing the face of the Great Flood Crown Prince. At this time, the Great Flood Crown Prince grasped a ghost saber in his hands. The blade was still behind him as he smiled at Lin Ming and Shang Mei. Moreover, you still dare to face me. What admirable courage! As the Great Flood Crown Prince spoke, cold light flashed from his eyes. Seeing the Great Flood Crown Prince, Shang Mei's complexion turned even uglier. She originally hoped that the Great Flood Crown Prince had been severely wounded by the Heart Demon test. If so, Lin Ming alone could deal with him. But now it seemed as if no harm had come to the Great Flood Crown Prince at all. This situation had truly devolved to the worst possible outcome. Whether it was the Great Flood Crown Prince or Lin Ming, currently their strength far exceeded her own. She simply couldn't control her own destiny right now. However, if she had to make a choice on who to face, it would definitely be Lin Ming. After all, from what she had seen, his character wasn't too bad and he hadn't tried to take advantage of her while she was down. Moreover, he seemed an open-minded individual. Even though he had encountered the ridiculous situation of her pregnancy, he still hadn't become enraged and was even still capable of discussing conditions. But, the Great Flood Crown Prince was someone that Shang Mei could never count on. He was nothing but a fierce wolf that ate others without spitting out their bones. And, he was known to be a sexual deviant. If she fell into his hands, the consequences would be dire. The feeling is mutual. Your Highness Crown Prince also seems to have passed the heart demon safely. Lin Ming smiled in fake civility. He faintly sensed that after passing through the impact of the Killing Lake's heart demons, the only ones still alive in this mystic realm were these 3. There had also been 2 other lower true divinities, but they too had perished during the impact of heart demons. This left Lin Ming startled. After all, those were true divinities. However, as he thought about the quantity of true divinities 10 billion years ago and 100 billion years and how they far surpassed the present, Lin Ming could still barely accept this. Ha ha ha. My cultivation method originally has an effect of suppressing heart demons, and I also possess a spirit treasure that blocks heart demons, so I luckily managed to pass safely. Otherwise, even if I did pass, I surely must have needed to pay a steep price. How could I possibly do so in such a relaxed manner like the Ninth Elder? Just look, it seems that even Her Highness the Holy Demoness didn't find it easy. Her Highness the Holy Demoness doesn't seem to have much strength remaining. The Great Flood Crown Prince faintly smiled at Shang Mei, his gaze containing lust and greed. He had certainly probed Shang Mei's situation with his sense before this. It was exactly because of Shang Mei's severe wounds that he was fully assured of his victory. As long as he could kill off Lin Ming, then regardless of it being the lucky chances in this underground cavern or Shang Mei herself, everything would belong to him. Chapter 2158, Fighting the Crown Prince. Black Flood. Seeing the naked aggression and lust in the Great Flood Crown Prince's gaze, Shang Mei was enraged to the extreme. Substantial killing intent burst out from her eyes. Ha ha ha. The Great Flood Crown Prince chortled. Shang Mei's response confirmed his suspicions that her wounds were incredibly deep and that she simply wasn't capable of fighting. Her killing intent seemed fierce, but it lacked the most essential supportive energy. It was nothing but bluster. Thinking of this, the Great Flood Crown Prince viciously eyed Lin Ming, his smile widening. Without Shang Mei, if he faced Lin Ming alone, then victory was already in his grasp. Ninth Elder, what a coincidence that you arrived at this time. I was planning on opening this bronze coffin. This strange mystic realm seems to have this coffin buried within it, and now that we've come this far, how can we miss out on it? I investigated the area just now and discovered that there aren't any mazes or traps in the vicinity. But, this bronze coffin seems to be sealed up by an array formation and is difficult to open using usual means. How about you and I work together? The Great Flood Crown Prince suddenly changed the topic, implying that he wanted to cooperate with Lin Ming. Lin Ming sneered inwardly. Not even a child would believe such words. What else do you want to say? Ha! What I actually mean is that after a brief investigation, I found some ancient totem cryptic characters carved upon this demon god relief. And, these cryptic characters are all blood-drinking array formations. I just threw down several corpses and found that the blood vitality essence energy of those corpses was all absorbed by the demon god relief. I was wondering, is it possible to force-feed the demon god relief until it's full, and would the bronze coffin then open? The Great Flood Crown Prince rubbed his chin as he spoke to hear. Unfortunately, the blood vitality essence energy within these corpses isn't too formidable. I think that the blood vitality of a living higher abyssal might be a bit more effective, right? Thus, I must ask your honored self to help me and give it a try. The Great Flood Crown Prince suddenly erupted with killing intent as he finished speaking. This sort of feeling was like nicely asking someone to borrow their head for a moment. Lin Ming narrowed his eyes. His spear-sharp gaze shot towards the Great Flood Crown Prince. He also wanted to know just what was hidden in this mystic realm. The reason he openly walked over here was also to explore this, and as for the Great Flood Crown Prince, battle between them was already unavoidable. Suddenly, a wild and tyrannical aura erupted from the Great Flood Crown Prince. He recklessly rushed forwards like a volcanic explosion. Roar! With a loud howl, a hideous demon stood up from behind the Great Flood Crown Prince. This demon surged with thick infernal energy. It split apart, turning into streams of light that fired towards Shang Mei and Lin Ming. Shang Mei's heart tightened and she raised her guard. But then, she discovered that they weren't the goal. Rather, the streams of light passed around her and Lin Ming to form a totem seal behind them. Piki Paka. Potent energy raced underground, weaving together with thunderous bangs. Finally, the totem seal blocked out the exit to this area. Lin Ming, Shang Mei, as well as the Great Flood Crown Prince were locked in this space above the demon relief. If it was said that the Great Flood Crown Prince had only been hinting at his hostility all this time, just now, after blocking anyone from escaping this space, it was the same as him baring his fangs, wanting to bite down on Lin Ming and Shang Mei's necks. Black Flood, you've got guts. Do you think that after you attack me here and leave, no one will know of it? Shang Mei unhurriedly said as she icily stared at the Great Flood Crown Prince. Ha 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 ha. Your Highness seems to have misunderstood. I have no intentions of attacking you, I simply wish to deal with this little toad beside you. As for your holy Demonis, I can't even wait for us to enjoy each other, so how could I possibly harm you? Your Highness is the most outstanding beauty in the world, far surpassing anyone else in the Dark Abyss, and you also possess the Dark Angel bloodline. If you join me, then once I become the Emperor of the Great Flood Demon Kingdom in the future, and you also inherit Deep King Road once that old freak Deep is dead, and meanwhile we can even find a chance to kill off that eyesore Deep child, then the two of us will rule the two most powerful influences in the Dark Abyss. When we join together, I can become the new demon god and you can become the new demon goddess. From then on you and I can control the abyss and establish our own everlasting dynasty. The Great Flood Crown Prince seductively said. If his desires had been hidden before, all of them had completely revealed themselves now. But at this time, a laugh lit up the scene. Lin Ming gently traced his spatial ring and looked at the Great Flood Crown Prince as if he were an idiot. New demon god? Have you tried looking in the mirror yet? Do you think you qualify? Not to mention the Soul Emperor that had some profound connection with the Dark Abyss as well as the incomparably mysterious Deep and Flood, even that dark and unfathomable Deep child was far more reliable than this Great Flood Crown Prince. If there really was a new demon god that would appear sometime, it definitely would not be this fellow's turn. However, after being mocked by the Lin Ming, the Great Flood Crown Prince didn't grow angry at all. Instead, his eyes held even more disdain as he looked at Lin Ming, the same way that he looked at a dead man walking. A toad must have the mind of a toad. When toads are reared together, it's always the loudest and dumbest that is slaughtered first. Since you are in such a hurry to die, then let me help you along. As the Great Flood Crown Prince spoke, his muscles suddenly bulged outwards. His muscles were like snakes that coursed over his body, hissing and howling. Then, he stepped forwards, his feet releasing thunderous bangs as they hit the ground. His tall and formidable body hurtled forwards like a bolt of lightning, his claw smashing down at Lin Ming's head. Be careful, Black Flood's strength is terrifying. Shang Mei rapidly passed a sound transmission to Lin Ming. Lin Ming's pupils shrank. Facing the Great Flood Crown Prince, there was no way he could underestimate his opponent at all. This was sure to be a troublesome opponent. Lin Ming flung out his right arm. From his inner world, the brilliance of the 9 stars of the Dao Palace dazzled. Whoosh! The black dragon spear covered in fierce bones shot out, stabbing straight towards Black Flood. Gotcha! With a loud crack, the Great Flood Crown Prince clenched his hand and formed a fist. This fist changed its attack trajectory at an unbelievable angle and struck down at the Black Dragon Spear's shaft. The spear shaft was struck so hard that it bent. Shards of bones fell down. I'll take your life. The Great Flood Crown Prince diabolically grinned. Another hand shot forwards. Like an executioner's blade, the ghost saber slashed towards Lin Ming's neck. This saber strike seemed to contain thousands and millions of demon spirits. These demon spirits wildly roared, their howls enveloping the world. Every attack happened in a spark of light. Roar! 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 Looking from afar, every demon was incredibly powerful, filled with infinite killing intent. Lin Ming crossed his arms in front of his chest. He rapidly drew backwards. At the same time, the power of demon gods erupted from within him. He poured this power into the Black Dragon Spear, causing tens of thousands of spear lights to shine out. These spear lights were as thick as a bucket and bewilderingly sharp. They danced about like crazed flood dragons, piercing through all obstacles. Ca. Demons were torn apart by these spear lights. The scene shook the heavens and earth. However, no matter how intense the battle between Lin Ming and Black Flood, the shockwaves of energy still weren't able to destroy the surrounding space. Here, the walls, the ground, everything was protected by an ancient totem spell. As the energy crashed into the spell, it rippled like waves before rebounding backwards. Rebound after rebound, the battle of two true divinity-level masters in this sealed-off space formed a horrifying storm. The storm also covered Shang Mei. Placed in this storm, she would definitely have to withstand indiscriminate attacks. Shang Mei subconsciously protected her belly with her hands. Her figure flashed and she flew down the cliff, hiding in the hollow in the massive canyon below. Here, the storm had mostly weakened. With her current strength, she could definitely withstand this. As she stood amongst the rocks and looked at the Lin Ming, who was in the midst of violent combat, her complexion was incomparably complex. She never thought that this man would dare to face the peak middle true divinity Great Flood Crown Prince. The disparity was simply too great. Although Lin Ming hadn't fallen into a disadvantage, she actually knew that the Great Flood Crown Prince had only been casually attacking, he simply hadn't utilized his true strength. Chapter 2159, 100,000 Heavenly Demons. In the skies, the Great Flood Crown Prince grasped his ghost saber, standing high in the air. From behind, tens of thousands of demons howled as they threw themselves at Lin Ming without end. Spear-light flashed. Demon after demon was cut down by Lin Ming. However, although the Great Flood Crown Prince was faintly surprised, he simply sneered and coldly said, "I seem to have underestimated you. I thought that my 10,000 demon strike would have been enough to deal with you, but I never imagined you could block it. Since that's the case, let me open your mind a little." As the Great Flood Crown Prince spoke, he began to slowly take off his war armor. The purple gold war armor was peeled off a layer at a time. This left Lin Ming startled. Generally speaking, in a fight between martial artists, each party would take out new weapons and hidden cards. But the Great Flood Crown Prince was actually discarding his own war armor. But when the Great Flood Crown Prince took off his chest armor and back armor, what Lin Ming saw left his scalp tingling with creepiness. Below that purple and gold war armor, the Great Flood Crown Prince was entangled in rows upon rows of thin chains. And these thin chains pierced through hideous and fierce twisted souls, lined up without end. The smallest of these souls was the size of a grain of rice, but some were as large as a fist. Some howled in pain and misery, and some roared in anger. The fist-sized demon spirits were incomparably fierce. They hung on the Great Flood Crown Prince's body, their mouths open wide as they wantonly ate away at his flesh and blood. After discarding the war armor, these souls were like a pack of hungry tigers released from a cage. Now, these starving tigers directed their gaze at Lin Ming, their eyes filled with infinite greed and hunger. This. Shang Mei breathed in a breath of cold air. Although the Great Flood Crown Prince had the body of a fierce abyssal warrior, his face was similar to that of a human and could even be considered handsome. In terms of overall appearance, he could barely be considered as passing standards. But after discarding his war armor and revealing the demon spirits below, the sight made it hard to even look his direction. This Great Flood Crown Prince actually had so many demon spirits below his armor. Like poisonous bug masters raising poisonous bugs on their own flesh and blood, the Great Flood Crown Prince raised these demon spirits with his own flesh and blood. This was a revolting sight. Thinking of the Great Flood Crown Prince's concubines, Shang Mei found it hard to remain calm. It was unimaginable just what sort of inhumane tortures they had to endure. He. Ordinary abyssals wear armor to protect themselves, but I am different. My strength, the strength of these demon souls I raise, is far too powerful, and sometimes even I cannot control them. Normally, I must use armor to seal away these demon souls. You should be sufficiently proud that I took off my war armor to deal with you. In order to deal with you, taking off my back and chest armor is more than enough. The Great Flood Crown Prince disdainfully sneered. The ghost saber in his hand began to shine with a bright red light, as if a leader of the demon souls was sealed within the saber and it was now beginning to awaken. 100,000 heavenly demons! The Great Flood Crown Prince roared. Then, with his mortal body like a lair of demons, a massive amount of demon spirits flooded out. For a time, terrifying demonic roars blotted out the heavens like a horrifying storm was brewing all around them. Compared to before, there were 10 times more demon spirits. From the 10,000 spirits previously, there were now 100,000 of them. These 100,000 heavenly demons each overflowed with ominous infernal energy as they leapt onto Lin Ming. The skies were covered in demon shadows, it was impossible to clearly see what was happening. At the start, Lin Ming's spear light was able to pierce through these demon spirits. But after they increased by 10 times in number, these demon spirits actually started to eat away the spear lights. The Great Flood Crown Prince brought his hands together. A giant ghost saber phantom formed, slashing down from the skies. This was a terrifying attack. Even though Lin Ming's abyssal body was incredibly intense, beneath this storm he still felt the blood vitality roiling and seething in his body, as if it would be drawn out by the layers upon layers of overlapping demon spirits. A middle true divinity was truly formidable. Lin Ming rapidly drew backwards. Becoming a true divinity was already difficult enough, and becoming a middle true divinity was even more difficult. Moreover, the Great Flood Crown Prince still had immense potential remaining, and might even reach the level of an upper true divinity in the future. Against such an opponent, even Lin Ming felt himself struggling. Seeing the overlapping waves of demon spirits, Lin Ming immediately activated his Azura blood. Bang! With a loud explosion, Lin Ming's body started to rise and grow. The bone spikes that covered him became longer and fiercer, and his deep amber eyes suddenly turned blood red. From within Lin Ming's inner world, the strength of his true self erupted. An Azura war god phantom coalesced behind his true self, and the power of Azura poured into his demon avatar without reserve. The demon avatar raised his hands, drawing a circle. A giant black wheel emerged from the air. Azura wheel. The Azura Road Master's road of martial arts deviated towards the road of slaughter to begin with. Now, as this Azura wheel appeared, it also roared with 10,000 demons, filled with a Buddha-slaying intent. In particular, Lin Ming now used the power of demons to manifest the Azura wheel. In terms of malevolence, the Azura wheel even surpassed the Great Flood Crown Prince's 100,000 heavenly demons. Bang! Demon flames lit up the skies. As the overlapping waves of demon spirits smashed into the wheel, they burst apart in ashes. However, Lin Ming's Azura wheel violently shook, seeming as if it would crack apart soon. Lin Ming was shocked. This Great Flood Crown Prince was truly formidable. This was an opponent he could not show even the slightest hint of carelessness. But at this time, the Great Flood Crown Prince was actually even more surprised. It was fine that the 10,000 demon strike wasn't able to deal with Lin Ming, he simply considered it as him having underestimated Lin Ming. But, even the 100,000 heavenly demons afterwards was barely blocked by Lin Ming. This left the Great Flood Crown Prince astonished. His previously confident look now froze on his face. The Great Flood Crown Prince's eyes flashed with icy cold light. He lifted the purple gold armor on his left arm and 10,000 some demon spirits ran out. Then, the Great Flood Crown Prince punched his own chest and spat out a mouthful of black blood. This black blood splashed onto the waves of demon spirits where it was absorbed by them. This blood was the Great Flood Crown Prince's blood essence. However, the cultivation method that the Great Flood Crown Prince trained in was particularly special. These heavenly demons were all personally refined by him, and although they had absorbed his blood essence, it actually couldn't be considered a loss. Rather, he was merely temporarily shifting his blood essence from his body to these demon spirits. From this aspect, these heavenly demon phantoms could be called the Great Flood Crown Prince's avatar. Now the Great Flood Crown Prince was diverting more of his strength into his avatar. However, no matter how it was said, in Shang Mei's eyes it was the truth that the Great Flood Crown Prince used the power of his blood essence. Even if he wasn't burning his blood essence, this was more than amazing. Facing Lin Ming, a middle true divinity was actually forced to use the strength of his blood essence. This simply defied the heavens. After the demon spirits absorbed a part of the Great Flood Crown Prince's blood essence, they became even crueler and more savage. They howled towards Lin Ming, now completely suppressing the Azura wheel. Bang! With a loud explosion, the Azura wheel shattered to pieces. Endless energy gathered together, forming a storm of demon power that fired outwards. Lin Ming's body shook. The bone armor on his chest nearly broke apart as he was sent tumbling away. Pang! Lin Ming slammed into the cliff walls that shined with runes. Blood overflowed from the corners of his lips. But at the same time, the Great Flood Crown Prince also drew backwards in the storm. His strike had managed to wound Lin Ming, and although the effects weren't as severe as he had hoped, he finally managed to feel a bit more comfortable with the situation. However, just as he steadied himself, the evil smile on his face froze. The shattered pieces of the Azura wheel mixed into the storm of energy. Then, like a hail of hidden weapons, they shot towards the Great Flood Crown Prince. Humph! The Great Flood Crown Prince coldly snorted. A single punch smashed apart 99% of the fragments, but a few fragments still scraped over his scales and sank into his body. Each fragment contained the concepts of life and death. This strength grew endlessly and was difficult to suppress. At the same time, the strength annihilated all as it recklessly swallowed the Great Flood Crown Prince's flesh and blood. This made it impossible for him to completely eliminate the strength of these fragments. This is... The Great Flood Crown Prince's eyes darkened. Lin Ming's abilities were too strange and bizarre, they contained laws he found impossibly difficult to understand. But at this time, Shang Mei was truly stunned. To use demon power to manifest the strength of the Azura laws, Shang Mei hadn't been able to recognize this because she wasn't proficient in them. But, with her familiarity with the life and death laws, how could she not see this for what it was? Less than half a year ago she had lent the incomparably esoteric and complex Holy Scriptures pages of death to Lin Ming to look over for a mere 3 days. In Shang Mei's opinion, no matter how talented Lin Ming was, it was impossible for him to perceive anything through this short period. He shouldn't have been able to grasp anything from them. But, she never imagined that not only would Lin Ming have managed to perceive something from them, but what he used now would seem to be nearly the complete laws of the Holy Scripture. How was this possible? Chapter 2160, Heavenly Demon Array. The Holy Scripture's laws were divided into the samsaric roads of life and death. But whether it was the road of life or the road of death, even if one had the complete Holy Scripture, it still required a long period of meditation to perceive. It wasn't something that could be completed in a few years. But now, seeing this towering abyssal used the laws of the Holy Scripture, although it was inferior to her own in certain ways, the difference wasn't much off. Moreover, Lin Ming seemed to have his own unique understandings of the Holy Scripture laws, and these understandings were completely different from Shang Mei's. At this time, Shang Mei's thoughts had already fallen into chaos. How could this ancient Eon sect's ninth elder thoroughly understand the Holy Scripture laws? Shang Mei didn't have time to think. At this time, the fierce battle between Lin Ming and the Great Flood Crown Prince heated up once more. By now, the Great Flood Crown Prince no longer hid anything. His body erupted with dazzling divine light as he took off all his war armor. As the purple gold war armor fell off, the demonic spirits around the Great Flood Crown Prince violently rumbled and countless heavenly demons roared as they rushed forwards. After going all out, the number of heavenly demons around the Great Flood Crown Prince had doubled, rising to 200,000. 200,000 heavenly demons gathered together, forming a giant wheel-shaped array. This array resembled an ancient totem, and these 200,000 heavenly demons formed the outline and ciphers of this totem. The entire array formation seemed as vast as the heavens, the power of this attack incomparable to before. Seeing this heavenly demon array, Lin Ming's complexion turned dignified. Now, as his understandings towards the power of demons increased, he could see just how powerful this array formation was. And at this time, Shang Mei was also covered in the howling storm produced by the battle between the two. She watched as the heavenly demon array formed and the Great Flood Crown Prince's momentum rose higher and higher even as Lin Ming's momentum was suppressed. The Great Flood Crown Prince's strength rose to a whole new level. As for Lin Ming, he had clearly become much weaker due to the previous clash. In this completely disproportionate follow-up, it was obvious who was weaker with a single glance. Shang Mei watched Lin Ming silently grasp the Black Dragon Spear. She wanted to help him, but she didn't have much strength left remaining. There simply wasn't anything she could do in her current state. Because of the impact of the heart demons, in addition to her present weakness and the raging storm that blew everywhere, she slowly felt pain in her lower belly. This pain was like a knife that stabbed at her heart. She didn't fear anything happening to her, but she feared that the child in her womb might be injured. If this continued, then she really didn't know just what possible consequences there would be. Originally, Xiang Mei still had the totem strength left within her by the Soul Emperor. As long as she encountered a truly life-threatening situation, she could use this strength to eliminate all dangers. But, this strength needed to be activated by the Soul Emperor's spirit mark. In a completely impossible situation, Xiang Mei had relied on the strength of a mother to overdraw her entire being and flush out the Soul Emperor's spirit mark. From that point on, while she had temporarily rid herself of the Soul Emperor's control, she had also lost the ability to use the Soul Emperor's strength. However, Xiang Mei would rather die than willingly return to the shadow of the Soul Emperor. In the storm, Xiang Mei tightly gripped her belly, her heart shaking. She no longer had any cards hidden in her sleeves. If there was one thing she could depend on here, then that would be Lin Ming. But the chances of Lin Ming winning were too small. If Lin Ming was killed, then she would suffer a fate worse than death. As for her child's fate, it would be even more tragic. Xiang Mei bit down on her lips. She looked at Lin Ming. At this time, Lin Ming grasped his bone spear and faced the Great Flood Crown Prince. Because the bone armor on his back had split open in the vicious attacks, blood flowed outwards, dripping through the air. Seeing the shocking red color, a mix of emotions rose in Xiang Mei's eyes. Although Xiang Mei couldn't accept this fiancé no matter what, in this moment of life and death, Lin Ming's towering back had become deeply engraved into Xiang Mei's heart. His appearance was fierce and hideous, and he was a quiet individual that never spoke much. But, in retrospect, Xiang Mei recalled that every time she was helpless or in distress, he never once took advantage of her while she was down, and instead stood in front of her. This is the end. The Great Flood Crown Prince's roar interrupted Xiang Mei's thoughts. At this time, the Great Flood Crown Prince's hair was disheveled and his face was distorted. He originally thought that using all his strength to defeat Lin Ming was nothing but an insult to himself. But after repeated failures and repeated frustrations, all he wanted to do was to mercilessly kill Lin Ming using overwhelming strength. Roar! 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 200,000 heavenly demons gathered. Cold winds howled as the world darkened. Amongst the infinite demons, the Great Flood Crown Prince slashed his saber down at Lin Ming. This saber condensed into a single line, the strength compressed to the limit. The potential within was so formidable that even the ancient array symbols that protected the walls in this mystic realm began to shiver. But at this time, Lin Ming's Azura will had just been crushed and it would take time to reform it. He poured the power of the 9 stars into the Black Dragon Spear and brought it smashing down. Bang! A horrifying explosion of energy erupted outwards. A black storm enveloped the entire mystic realm. The Black Dragon Spear's spear-light was entirely washed away. Lin Ming's eyes widened. He rapidly drew backwards, energy erupting from his body. His strength seemed without end. Spear after spear, he thrust forth countless times. Hundreds and thousands of spear lights gathered together and crashed onto the Great Flood Crown Prince's heavenly demon array. However, the heavenly demon array was far too powerful. The difference in strength between the Great Flood Crown Prince who went all out and the Lin Ming who didn't utilize the Azura laws was obvious. Gotcha! Spear light tore apart. Although Lin Ming just barely managed to disperse the Great Flood Crown Prince's saber light, countless heavenly demons still hurtled down at him. Lin Ming spat out a mouthful of blood. His body tumbled backwards as he crashed into the stone walls. The bone armor and scales on his body split open in countless places. The 2 bone spikes on his elbows also broke apart. Lin Ming's strength had weakened not just a little with this collision, but by a great deal. Xiang Mei's heart skipped a beat. The Great Flood Crown Prince viciously grinned. The effect of this strike was what he was looking for. "You're finished." On the Great Flood Crown Prince's face, demon seals began to appear. These were mystic demon seals that only special abyssal bloodlines possessed. These types of seals could be considered the secret technique of a clan. After utilizing these demon seals, the Great Flood Crown Prince's strength rose once more. His body shook with energy. The sounds of landslides and tsunamis filled the air, and the heavens and earth howled as if they would flip over. Aoo! The 200,000 heavenly demons seemed to go mad as they became increasingly wild. The Great Flood Crown Prince's eyes burst out with killing intent. He slashed his saber down at Lin Ming once more. With this saber strike, a black tsunami seemed to erupt. Waves rose to the heavens, blotting out the skies. Just as Lin Ming was about to be torn apart by this saber light, he traced his spatial ring and flung out his right arm. A bronze light flashed, becoming increasingly large as it spun about. This was a giant bronze bell. Atop this great bell, flowers and birds and insects were carved within, as well as all sorts of ancient demon marks. Seeing the bronze bell, the Great Flood Crown Prince was stunned. "This is the Yin Yang Twin Ghosts Yin Yang Twilight Bell? You killed the Yin Yang Twin Ghosts." The Great Flood Crown Prince was shocked. The Yin Yang Twin Ghosts were demon association elders that were part of the Flood Alliance. They were blood brothers and their hearts and minds were linked together. They were inseparable and were also skilled in joint attacks. On their own, the Yin Yang Twin Ghosts weren't too strong. But together their combat strength was actually terrifying. The Great Flood Crown Prince hadn't known that the Yin Yang Twin Ghosts had perished and their life's magic tool, the Yin Yang Twilight Bell, had fallen into Lin Ming's hands. But now he was afraid that the Yin Yang Twin Ghosts had already died. The Yin Yang Twilight Bell was a true divinity spirit treasure that focused on defense. Moreover, it was of an extremely high rank and the heavy bell's body was incredibly difficult to destroy. But it was impossible to stop an attack on the level of the Great Flood Crown Princes with this Yin Yang Twilight Bell alone. Moreover, this was a magic tool of others and Lin Ming had only possessed it for a short time, so the strength of the bell he could display was surely limited. "Humph! You want to rely on that to stop me? How naive!" The Great Flood Crown Prince disregarded the bell and continued to cut downwards. Clang! With a loud bang, the Great Flood Crown Prince's saber slashed down onto the Yin Yang Twilight Bell. The bell emitted a thunderous response, and as the saber light tore through it, a giant tear actually formed on the surface of the bell. The bell was sent flying away by the saber strike. This bell only delayed the Great Flood Crown Prince's saber strike for half a moment before it continued cutting down at Lin Ming without any hindrance. 200,000 heavenly demons howled, forming the heavenly demon array to lock down Lin Ming in this killing strike.